Oscar goes to Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Picture This, a show that we have been doing every month here on the channel, but we haven't recorded, Chad and I, in quite some time. Actually sat down and recorded because we banked a bunch of episodes. So, Chad, welcome back. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
It's good to see your face.
Yeah. And just like the Lonely Island, you're on a boat.
I am, yes. So barring any technical difficulties, we recorded with Kelsey for Marvel's Movie Mondays, and it worked. So I'm hoping it works here. Everything looks so good so far. Chad looks crystal clear on my end. Sounds crystal clear. I think I sound crystal clear on his end. But if anything happens, you all let us know in the comments if there's anything we can improve. Hopefully, this is the new norm, and we can do this and make this work at least until the end of the year when I'm back home, and then business as usual. But Chad, what have you been up to? How's it going?
Everything's been great. My son can jump now. Still have cats, and they're awesome.
Who also jump now. Have been jumping.
Definitely jump, and they've been jumping.
Yeah.
Mr. Banks. Has it been a sweet life on deck for you?
It has, yeah. It's been very, very nice. I mean, I'm actually getting to watch movies, which is fun. That hasn't gone away because I do have some free time, but the work has been
That's
great,
important.
and I do love just the ship life and the people I'm with, and just new developments in my life as well, which I may talk about later, which is kind of weird, but it does have to do with one of the movies in an odd way. But we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, like a really great time. But I did miss this. I missed just the norm of getting on here and recording with you and just chatting about movies. And we have a lot of movies to chat about today, so we got to kind of jump right in. But it is the year of the upset, and it is also the retrospective, and they actually happen to both kind of collide because the year of 2015 gave us a bunch of upsets. Visual effects had an upset, supporting actor had an upset, and you could say Best Picture had an upset as well. A pretty big upset, I would say, probably the biggest until the next year in 2016 at least. But I do think it was a pretty big upset, at least at the time, where Spotlight took down The Revenant, which was kind of like the big two battling it out. And then there were other films in there that kind of had a chance, kind of didn't. We'll talk about it in a sec. But it is the year 2015. It is a retrospective, and it's exciting because we both obviously lived through it. We both were also very active moviegoers during it too. I remember vividly seeing Star Wars: The Force Awakens 4 times in theaters. I remember my first time seeing Inside Out. I had a high school girlfriend at the time. We saw so many movies together. So like it is just kind of really interesting to like kind of look back at this is kind of my senior year of high school, junior into senior year of high school, and see like me finally going to like some of these more mature movies. Like, I saw Trainwreck, and I saw The End of the Tour. These movies that are a little bit more mature, a little bit more adult at the time. But I also saw Minions. I also saw The Good Dinosaur. So it's just going to be really interesting to like kind of just go back with these next few videos, because this is one of the first videos coming out for the retrospective. But looking at A24 coming up, and then just doing my top 10, and then doing my Oscars, and just seeing what my tastes are, what they used to be and still are now. But I'm curious, Chad, what were you up to in 2015? And also, what was the world up to in 2015? Actually, should I give them the slate? Because I feel like I should do that. And I forgot to give them the slate. We're rusty. I'm rusty. Chad's been working on his doc, but I am rusty for this. So here we go. The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, Room, not the Tommy Wiseau Room, and Spotlight. There we go. Those are the 8 films.
Pretty
that
great
we'll be talking about.
I'll say it right now. It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's great. I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts on all of them, because I agree. I think it's just a solid slate across the board. I don't think there's any huge like misfires, if any. But it is interesting that I do think this is one of those years where like everything's good, but there's still like 1 or 2 titles that just is like so good that I'm like, it almost kind of makes the rest of the slate not feel as good, but it is good. You know what I mean? It's like this whole slate is really good. It's just like there's 1 or 2 movies that I think are genuine like masterpieces, best of all time cinema, that like kind of the rest do take a step down because of that. But we'll talk about that later, because I also think there's like a lot of great hidden gems there. But okay, Chad, I'll go back to my original question. What were you up to?
I am now interested. But I am now interested, though, to see, like, if we align on that. But
Yeah, maybe not. One thing I will say is I do think if you would ask me in 2015, I would have said this is maybe the best slate of all time. But I do
Yeah.
think with time, maybe I'm a little cooler on some of these movies because also a lot of these movies deal with like suspense or mystery in a sense. Is this going to happen? Are they going to accomplish this goal? Where I think just rewatches sometimes don't help with rewatchability for that stuff. But anyway, Chad, tell us about the history of 2015.
Well, I'll say right now, doesn't feel like a very great time, which is why it's really fun to be talking movies with you, and not politics and the world. But so let's transport back to 2015.
Yes, before it all went to shit. Before
exactly, like right before.
I think it was like primaries were happening during 2015, like Hillary, Bernie, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, Bernie. Anyways, yeah. 2 Al Qaeda gunmen. Okay, this one's pretty bad. 2 Al Qaeda gunmen killed 12 members of Charlie Hebdo, which is a French satirical weekly magazine. Rubella, also known as German measles, is declared eradicated from the Americas by the World Health Organization. That's good. ISIS captures the ancient city of Palmyra in Syria. Greece goes through a debt crisis. The New Horizons spacecraft from NASA becomes the first in history to visit the distant world of Pluto, performing a close flyby. Full diplomatic relations are restored between the United States and Cuba. Windows 10 is released by Microsoft. Queen Elizabeth II becomes the longest reigning British monarch in history. Gravitational waves are detected for the first time by the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. NASA announces liquid water was found on Mars. Paris holds the 2015 United Nations Climate Change Conference. And this is very relevant to today. OpenAI is founded.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very relevant. What about you, Chad? Any memories from 2015? Anything to report on your life? Like, where were you at in your life? Do you know?
Dude, it's all a kind of a blur. I don't even really know. I think I was getting more into music, working.
Yeah. So you were out of college at this point.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Definitely.
Yeah, because I know you're a few years older. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the timeline. Yeah, because this was like high school for me, so like everything is so vivid. I'm like, whoa, this is weird. Like looking back at this, I'm like, this was 10 years ago. Is just so crazy to me. But yeah, wild. But you mentioned music. Is there any music? We can do births, deaths, and then talk about some music from the time as well. You got anything for us?
Yeah, I dig the transition. I just have one birth from 2015. Princess Charlotte of Wales. I like to include at least one if I can. Deaths, Christopher Lee, great. Leonard Nimoy, great. Nimoy. B.B. King, great. Bo Biden. Roddy Piper. And I got the quote, "I came here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. I'm all out of bubblegum."
Yes. Nice.
The tribute. All right. And then for the albums, I have a few here, of course. So I have some of the greatest albums of all time, in my opinion. Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly."
Yes.
Phenomenal album.
Oh, I know what's coming. Okay, keep going. Nothing. Keep going.
And then you have Sufjan Stevens' "Carrie and Lowell," the 10th anniversary edition that he released. Love that album. And then you have albums like "Currents" by Tame Impala. And then you have "Emotion" by Carly Rae Jepsen. And then you have this one is "Sometimes I Sit and Think and Sometimes I Just Sit" by Courtney Barnett. And then you also have "I Love You, Honey Bear" by Father John Misty. I actually do own that. I didn't grab that. "Art Angels" by Grimes. "The Epic" by Kamasi Washington. "Hand Cannot Erase" by Stephen Wilson. And "Have You in My Wilderness" by Julia Holter. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. That's great.
No, yeah, I was like, I know what's coming because I know what To Pimp a Butterfly lost to at the Grammys, but I did check it. 1989 was in 2014. But I was waiting for that to be like,
Well, they were kind of up against each other, but I wasn't going to really bring that up.
I know, yeah. Well, because I know it's a conversation we've had many times. But another year of the upset, if you will, because the Grammys this year had an upset that Chad and I
Oh,
have
you
debated
mean
over.
if I would have brought up 1989, then I would have said something about it, probably, but
Yeah. No, I as soon as you showed To Pimp a Butterfly, I'm like, oh, I know it's coming.
like
and
rank
I-
1989 last, like just as a shot.
No. But
Good
yeah,
album too,
1989. The Grammy battle between 1989 and To Pimp a Butterfly was 2015. Even though 1989 came out in 2014, so we don't need to talk about it. Even though Chad and I have
Yeah.
talked about it plenty.
Yeah.
But yeah, just fascinating. Great music of that year.
Oh, yeah.
But we got to transition to the movies now. We got to get to the Oscars. Before we get to the Oscars history, let's talk about the movies that didn't make the cut. Obviously, I'm going to be doing my top 10 on the channel at some point for 2015, or I guess I'll do my top 15 and a few other videos. So I'm not going to reveal too much of what I would have nominated per se as my favorites of that year. But Chad, rattle off some notable titles, and then I might chime in with some more if you miss any. But notable films of 2015, because there are definitely some that are not on this list of 8 that are worth mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say you might be more of an expert on this one doing your retrospective, but I have The Voices, Kingsman: The Secret Service, Cinderella, Furious 7, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Spy, Ant-Man, Southpaw, The Gift, Bone Tomahawk, The Peanuts Movie, The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 2, Krampus, The Hateful Eight, and for my best picture worthy, I have a lot, actually. I have It Follows, Ex Machina, Love and Mercy, Inside Out, Shaun the Sheep Movie, Tangerine, Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, Straight Outta Compton, Sicario, Crimson Peak, Creed, and Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Might be a hot take there. I don't know.
Not a hot take. It's in my 10. It
Nice.
is a crazy year. Yeah. A few other titles. I don't know if you mentioned Paddington, the first Paddington.
How did I
2015.
not see that one? Jesus.
Technically, it was 2014 in the UK, so maybe that's
That's
why
a best.
it wasn't
That's the
listed.
best picture right there for
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know if you mentioned the Hateful Eight or
Yeah.
What We Do in the Shadows.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I mean, so many good movies that year. Yeah, I'm just like looking through. There's just a lot, and some big cultural ones that like weren't good, but like made big splashes, like Fantastic Four, the awful Josh Trank one, 50 Shades of Grey, Minions, Aloha, the Camera Crow movie, like a lot of movies that just like are notorious, like stinkers, which is good for framework for this channel. But as for the films that did make it, we obviously listed off the 8. It's important to look at precursors here. The chart is a little teeny tiny, but we can kind of squint here. The only movies to get nominated for every awards body were The Big Short, The Revenant, and Spotlight, and those were kind of the big 3 going into the night as the biggest contenders. Spotlight obviously won the Critics' Choice. Didn't win anything else, though, so Spotlight was not really a contender to win. A lot of people weren't thinking it was going to win. A lot of people thought it could have been The Big Short because it got that PGA win, which was huge. But most people were thinking it was The Revenant because The Revenant got the Globe, The Revenant got the BAFTA, it was nominated for everything. Inuyasha had just won the year before, but it was still a high. Leo was going to win Best Actor. So a lot of people thought The Revenant was going to win. That was kind of like the number one thing. But it didn't. It went to Spotlight, even though Spotlight only picked up Critics' Choice on the way there. Some shocking stuff. I didn't realize Room was not nominated for BAFTA or PGA. It was kind of not as much of a sure thing as I thought it would be. Brooklyn also got snubbed in a few places. Mad Max didn't get a BAFTA nomination, but otherwise, I mean, those 8 movies kind of popped up everywhere. If we're looking for what is like the next one in, because we always kind of like to look at that to just see what might have been next up if the Academy had nominated 9 movies or 10 movies. I've got a chart right here. Carol is the big one. Carol was up for PGA, BAFTA directing, Critics' Choice directing, WGA, Golden Globe nominations, acting, screenplay. Carol got pretty much every precursor it needed, but somehow missed the Oscar. So a big shock there that Carol did not get in there, at least to the 8. If there had been 10, I'm almost certain Carol would have been there, just because of all those precursors it got. That is a rarity to get all those things and not get an Oscar nomination, especially in a
Oh,
field
yeah.
of 8 to 10. But other movies that were kind of on the bubble, obviously Sicario got a PGA Critics' Choice and WGA nomination. Straight Outta Compton got PGA and WGA. Steve Jobs actually won the Globe for screenplay and got a WGA nomination. And then obviously Star Wars only got Critics' Choice, but it was such a phenomenon at the time that people were saying if there were 10 nominees, there's a very good chance it would have been Carol and Star Wars, just because Star Wars was just like the phenomenon of the time. Kind of like how we see the Avatar movies always sneak in there. Kind of how Wicked was such a big thing. Like sometimes you just have to be the moment, the movie of the moment, and it doesn't matter what precursors you have. Also worth noting that Star Wars came out after the BAFTA and PGA deadlines, so it could not have been nominated for those things. So it only got nominated for Critics' Choice, and then of course some Oscar nominations, but didn't get Best Picture. But Chad, you mentioned which ones were Best Picture worthy, and we've talked about the other films that didn't make the cut. Any last thoughts on the Oscars or the upset itself, or do you want to just dive into the movies and then we could kind of talk about the upset as they come?
Well, I was just wondering, like, about like what you were just talking about and how you were a little bit more in the Oscar like mindset. I think probably around 2015.
Oh yeah, I was
Like,
big crunching the numbers. Yeah, like I can go back and find Facebook posts of me just like talking about each category and going
but
through the research.
do you think was it like a huge thing? Like, oh my God, Carol didn't get a nomination. Was that like a big thing?
It was, yeah, it was a
Yeah.
bit shocking just because it had gotten like all those precursors, but also I think because like both of the lead actors were getting nominated, like the nominations it got on Oscar morning were big. It was like they got screenplay, they got 2 acting nominations. Like it really seemed like a sure thing, especially because like
Yeah.
movies like even Bridge of Spies, not Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Room. I guess those were kind of not surprises on the day, but those were not as sure things. And because they
Yeah.
had the opportunity to nominate 9 or 10, they didn't need to nominate 8. Everyone was just assuming Carol would get in, but it didn't, and I think that's kind
Yeah.
of just. I did rewatch Carol for the retrospective. I personally wouldn't put it in my 10, but I do think it's a beautiful movie, and I know a lot of critics like looking at top 10 lists from that time. Carol was number 1 of a lot of them, so it was kind of
Wow.
a critic darling that I just don't think took off with the industry, maybe. But before we move on to the movies, actually, there are a few upsets from the night that I kind of alluded to earlier. We can give a little time to when we talk about Bridge of Spies, but Mark Rylance beating Sylvester Stallone was a huge upset on the
Oh, yeah.
night. People thought this was going to be Stallone's big career Oscar because, as we talked about with Dan a few months ago, he didn't get nominated for the first Rocky. When the movie
Wild.
won, he didn't win because he didn't produce it. Or maybe he was part of the production team, but I really don't think so. I don't think he made a speech, or I don't think he accepted an award for it. So like this was his big opportunity, at least acting wise.
Yeah.
And it went to Mark Rylance. I remember that being a shock because it was also one of the first awards of the night. And then another huge one, which I think was my biggest shock of the night, not even Spotlight beating The Revenant, but Ex Machina winning visual effects over Mad Max was a huge upset.
Yeah.
That I remember just everyone was like, what? Whoa. But really cool. Like, honestly, I love Mad Max and I'm glad it got so much. But honestly, if you're going to give one award to someone else, I think it's cool that they spread the wealth and gave it to like Ex Machina, which is such like a lo-fi science fiction film. So that was just one of those upsets that like always sticks with me because it's one of those things that is like purely based on merit because Ex Machina didn't really have a lot of hype. It also got a screenplay nomination, but it wasn't like this big award juggernaut in the way that Mad Max was. Mad Max had won like 6 texts that night. So it was just such a cool win for Ex Machina to win visual effects. So I distinctly remember being really upset that Sylvester Stallone didn't win, being really thrilled that Ex Machina surprised, and then just being like, whoa, when Spotlight won, just because I feel like by that time in the night, I was like, oh, Spotlight's only won 1 award. The Revenant has won a bunch. Like, it's probably just going to be The Revenant, and then it didn't win. So we'll talk about that for sure, because that was another big upset was Picture, and I think it's cool when Best Picture nowadays is a huge upset because usually you can see it coming a mile away. Everything Everywhere All at Once, and what was right after that? Oppenheimer. It's like, all right, it's nice to have your surprises. Even Honora, we kind of knew by the time it won that it was going to win, especially given what it had won that day. But it's really fun where they open the envelope and you're like, whoa, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, Honora Picture wasn't the question; it was actress.
Right. Yeah,
But,
and even by then, when Honora had won screenplay director, I was like, okay, it's winning actress too. So, yeah, but Spotlight only won one other award, so we'll also talk about that.
The other cool thing that I wanted to mention from your graphics that I didn't even really think about is that I just remember the time in 2015 when The Force Awakens was like not just like a fan favorite, but it like won the Critics' Choice. You said,
It
which
was
is like
nominated. Sorry, but yeah, it got
it was
nominated for Critics' Choice,
nominated
which
for
is still
Critics'
huge.
Choice,
Yeah, still huge.
which is like the critics are saying like that this is like the next great Star Wars movie, and I feel like because of like what happened with the trilogy, it's been kind of demoted a lot. Now people just lump it in with all the, they just go, that's the Disney Star Wars, and it's not good. And then now they're just all on Andor, and I'm like, come on, man.
yeah. Granted,
It's so
Andor I
great.
heard is fantastic, but yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
yeah, it's a definitely a disservice. Because yeah, it is a really great film, and honestly, some would argue you as well that Last Jedi might be even better. And that came out the next year. Like
I
it's
love
really
them
only that
both.
third one that people think is a stinker. Even though I think Star Wars: Force Awakens is your favorite one, if I remember from our ranking.
Yeah, I
At
put
least
Force
at the time.
Awakens above Last Jedi, but they're like neck and neck. But
Yeah.
this isn't a Star Wars podcast. We should get on to the 2015
We
movies.
should. We got to keep this episode semi-short. So let's talk about The Big Short, if you will, the first
Nice.
movie on our list. I know, right? The segues are still there. I'm a little rusty otherwise, but segues still come pretty easy. So, Chad, tell us about The Big Short.
The Big Short, directed by Adam McKay, written by Charles Randolph and Adam McKay. Cinematography by Barry Ackroyd. Music by Nicholas Bertel. Starring Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Hamish Linklater, Rafe Spall, Jeremy Strong, Maria Tomei, John Magaro, Brad Pitt, Karen Gillan, Finn Whitrock, Max Greenfield, Margot Robbie, Anthony Bourdain, and Selena Gomez. Synopsis: America has a huge problem with investments in the housing market, while there are people willing to exploit it and other people marveling at the sheer stupidity and ignorance behind it. Based on the novel The Big Short by Michael Lewis.
Yeah. So this is kind of like the first of Adam McKay's like serious movies,
Yeah.
where he would go on to make quite a bunch of them. Then they would all get nominated. Big Short, Vice, Don't Look Up. Like he's really been on a run. This was a huge reinvention for him in terms of just like kind of reshaping his image from the kind of like stupid comedy guy. Not to say his movies are stupid, but very silly. Anchorman and Step Brothers, stupid comedies. And then kind of taking that comedic lens and kind of catering it to more of an energized drama. Kind of having the pacing and feel of a comedy, but also delivering something that's actually serious and has something to say about the world and politics and the economics and all that. So this kind of started a whole new wave for his career, and he gets nominated for this as well. It's always really interesting to see a director kind of reinvent themselves and reshape what their career has been into something new and fresh, while also staying true to what they had before as well. But Chad, what do you think of this? I know you're a huge Adam McKay fan. I know you love his comedies. I know you love Anchorman. But what do you think of The Big Short?
Yeah, I think The Big Short's great. I came to this a little bit late. I remember, because I didn't see it in the theater, I remember friends who saw it were like, it was kind of falling asleep during that movie. And so I was going in for the longest time thinking that The Big Short was probably the most boring movie of all time, just based on what my friends had said. And then when I finally watched it with Carrie, we were kind of like enamored just by like the subject matter, just by how Adam McKay helms it. I think it's like you talked about, like his comedy sensibilities mixed in with the subject matter is pretty great, because he's able to do all of the drama stuff, all of the serious stuff, and capture that while having like funny stuff in it. So it helps you get you through. Like this is very complicated. Here's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath to explain the complicated thing here.
Yeah.
And then, so it cuts to her doing that. And that's really silly. Or cuts to Selena Gomez, playing craps or whatever it is. And, trying to explain stuff. Or Anthony Bourdain in his kitchen explaining stuff. And it's just like, how do you get a lot of this really, it's like the stuff is so complicated and so weird and so kind of dumb too. Like you talk about dumb comedies, like the actual, like, stuff that happened was like so dumb in a way. that it's like, how do you explain all of this in a movie that, because you can read it in the book, but like, how is it entertaining in the movie? And I think that he found like the most entertaining way. So that's why it's like surprised me to see like, when people say that it's boring. I'm like, I think this movie's kind of fascinating. Like, sure, the subject matter, like talking about numbers and math and debt and stuff, doesn't sound interesting at all. But Adam McKay found some sort of like formula to actually make this pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that people would say this is boring because I agree. I think the best thing about this is that it takes something that is so non-digestible
Yeah.
and makes it so easy, not necessarily easy to follow, because I still think a lot of this like goes over
Sounds
my
like
head. It goes over a lot of people's heads, and even with subtitles, you're kind of like, wait, what?
Right?
But at least makes it exciting to watch, and that's the thing is like it's kind of like that phrase when they say like singers like, oh, you can sing the phone book. It's like, you can sing numbers, and as long as you're a great singer, like it's going to sound great and people are going to want to listen. It's kind of the similar thing. It's like this is singing the phone book. It's like we don't care what's being said, but you're doing it in such an interesting, fascinating way, and an engaging and kinetic way that we want to lean in and know more. And you have a lot of these personalities that are very memorable, a lot of actors that are very memorable, the cameos. Just the style and the way he plays around with his style. I do think at times it's a little more style over substance, in the fact that like I think if you were to just kind of present this screenplay matter of factly, maybe it's not as good. Maybe it is just kind of like boring homework, eating your veggies. But that's not the movie we got. We got something that is very electric and very fun and
Yeah.
in a way chaotic. And I do think this style. I think the problem with Adam McKay for me is that like I think he's tried to do this with every movie now. He's tried to like give it that flair, and I think at times I would like some of his movies to breathe a little bit more. I think for this film though, it works really well. Even though again this material kind of still goes over my head. I actually think at the time seeing it in the theater with my dad, I actually think I got a lot more of it out of it than I did this time in terms of like just the processing of information. Because back then I was in high school, so I was kind of still a student trying to like absorb information and learn. And I also had my dad to kind of explain things to me either throughout the film or after the film. Whereas this time I kind of was just watching and I was like, whoa, like this is a lot of mumbo jumbo that I just like is going over my head. Not to say, anyone is more or less intelligent of a viewer, but it is one of those things that it is very a big information overload. So it's nice that it kind of is an easier pill to swallow. The only thing on the flip side of that is that when it does need to get more like emotional and kind of like hit kind of the sentimental highs, I do feel like sometimes that's lost in favor of like the kind of comedy and style. I do think sometimes this film could have taken a little bit more time to breathe, because it is at an 100 the whole time. It's like how you need to make a pit stop, to refuel when you're in a long race. Like sometimes you just need that pit stop, which I don't know if this movie has. And I think this movie then, when it gets to those moments, it thinks it's got you. But I do think just because of the way the movie has presented itself, it doesn't hit as emotionally hard as like other movies in the slate do that really take their time to give that punch. But yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I just think it's so fun to like see a director kind of just pull all the stops and just make something that is so different and new and fresh, for an audience that probably doesn't understand half the things that are being said. I just think that's a real power as a filmmaker to be able to still make a movie entertaining, and just to hear that people were bored by it is just fascinating, because I do think that's the one thing it's not. It's boring. Like I may not understand it all. I may not like the characters. I might think the style is a little overbearing at times, but I'm never bored by it. Which I think is a real testament to Adam McKay and his versatility for sure.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I know like you talk about like maybe like a little bit of a lack of emotion. Of emotion. I can kind of see that, where you're coming from with that, because, I don't feel like it's, necessarily trying to be like an overly emotional movie. It's more kind of like a horror movie in a lot of ways, where it's like, this is kind of like they're exposed, kind of like another movie that we'll talk about, Spotlight. It's like, they're exposing like this big, not conspiracy really, but like this big lacking in society, and like what people are doing, how things work, and how things are structured to where someone can take advantage of these large organizations and banks and, cause the economy to almost collapse and go into recession. And as we know, like that's what happened. And so, and then now, in today's time, we're seeing, the weaknesses inside of, political structures and stuff that can be taken advantage of to also start to cripple things. And so to watch a movie like this, it was just kind of like a precursor to maybe things that are happening now.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of like a big horror movie in a way where you're just like, you in the movie and you just go, that was terrifying. That was like, how are we, in a world where someone can exploit things to that level?
It's hard to talk about the actual events of the movie because again, so much of it is so dense and there's so
Yeah.
much to talk about that I feel like if you get into a conversation about it, you're just going to go into a spider's web of just different thoughts and topics and stuff. But yeah, I just really like how the information is conveyed here.
Yeah.
It's hard because also stylistically, the quick editing and the quick cutting and the banter and the dialogue is very fresh and very fun. But just in terms of its visual, language, I do think maybe in the hands of someone a little bit more seasoned, like I don't want to necessarily say Scorsese, but like this reminds me a lot of Wolf of Wall Street, the similar energy.
Yeah.
I think that movie balances a little bit more of like the character study of it all a little bit better too. Whereas here it just seems like it's all about plot, less about character. And I think that might be where I'm coming from with the whole like emotional thing. Is it's not as character focused. It feels like these characters are here merely to like tell us about something and not really like kind of have their own kind of attributes and journeys and stories. They have their own emotions, and then some are more hot-headed than others. Some have different personalities. But I feel like we're not seeing them as affected. A lot of the people who are affected are more like secondary, tertiary characters. In a similar way that like I think Spotlight we'll talk about is as well. But I do think in that one, like the people at the center of the film also have a lot of growth and a lot of range, and they kind of dig a little deeper into their stories. Whereas here, I felt like a lot of the main characters, like I just didn't feel like they were as fully fleshed out personalities because we didn't get as much growth. It was mostly there to like tell us information. But again, to tell us information in such a fun way is very engaging and very easy to enjoy,
I mean, I'll say, yeah, I think that's kind of like how Adam McKay writes characters a lot of the times, because his whole, I mean, you can see with all three of his films, his whole like sensibility is kind of like sort of like an eye rolly kind of like satirical kind of thing, where it's like, which Wolf of Wall Street kind of is too, where it's like, we're going to show all these people for what they are, and you can judge kind of like, whether you think they're just complete idiots, they're geniuses, or whatever, but the tone of the movie is kind of that they're idiots. But with this one also, I do think you do get some interesting character stuff, because I feel like Christian Bale is always like really good at like doing like the character like making characters, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like where he has the eye thing. He's very eccentric and quirky, and like runs around his office in like very informal clothes and just kind of seems like he lives there. And then when you have Steve Carell, he is very he matches like the tone of the movie, because he's very frantic a lot of the times. But I do feel like if there is any like good weight in the movie, I feel like it is with his character a lot of times, because Christian Bale's just there to kind of like exploit the thing, like be really smart, see the thing, exploit it. And Steve Carell's kind of like us, where he's like just finding out about this, and then he's just like, what is going on? Like, this can't be real. And like at the end, like when he finally kind of is understanding like really what's going on, and he's got like that shock of, this is how the world works. And I feel like, it kind of lingers on him a little bit and stuff like that. So I do think we do get some like good like character stuff. But I would agree that like, it might not be Adam McKay's like big focus, because he's doing like a lot of the quick editing and, fast paced stuff that you mentioned. So, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And that I think that's, just Adam McKay's style. But I do wonder, like what you brought it up, how this could have been approached if it was a different director. That's a
Yeah.
very good thought
Yeah.
experiment.
And I know when I talked about Scorsese, I got into like the character of Wolf of Wall Street, but my main point originally, before I went sidetracked in my brain, was that I think he just visually kind of like has a more interesting visual style that I think Adam McKay, if he had that with the editing, it would have been like really, really, really cool. Whereas I think if you were to take away the quick editing and just kind of present it as is, it kind of looks a little flat. It kind of looks almost a little TV in terms of like the mise en scène and the actual lighting and the composition. But what I will say is that I think he did improve upon that in Vice, actually, and we'll talk about that someday. But like just the way he kind of utilized color a little bit more and kind of found a little bit more of a interesting visual dynamic style in addition to kind of this quick kind of frenetic energy. And that's what I like about Adam McKay is I feel like he does, even though I really don't like Don't Look Up, I do think he's at least trying to not necessarily do the same thing every time in the same way, but kind of take the best things of each movie, change the things that weren't working, and try to keep building and growing on that style rather than just reusing the style, which I really like. A lot of people do say a lot of his movies now are a little samey. I do think they all have an altruism, but I do think they are different enough. Like I could definitely see the differences between each movie and what he's trying to go for, at least visually speaking, and in the terms of the writing and the characters and the pacing. But I do like that you could still see a movie and be like, that's an Adam McKay movie, for better or for worse. But I do think that's something to admire, and the fact that it is a little messy, it is a little bloated, but it is a little frenetic and chaotic. I like that because it's showing that he's like wanting to level up as a filmmaker. He wants to kind of take those risks and be bold. And like, sure, maybe you're not getting the emotional gut punches I hoped you would get for something like this, in the midst of the comedy, in the midst of the fast energy and fast pacing, and maybe some of the characters need some fleshing out. But it's like, if this is primarily a exercise in filmmaking, then I think like that's a win because he's obviously doing something different, doing something engaging, exciting, new, fresh. Whereas you have other directors in the slate that I feel like are kind of not reining it in necessarily, but like kind of doing something that is expected of them and doing something very well. But here it's like, no, like I would not expect this from him. And I think now in retrospect, this movie works worse because we've seen him continue to do this thing and we know he's not just a one-trick pony. We know he can replicate it. Whereas like if you were to watch this in 2015, I think this would have honestly been higher in my ranking because it would have been so like, whoa. And I think the same is true with like a lot of movies that are just like mind-blowing at the time. It's like, okay, 10 years later, I'm not necessarily like, whoa, Adam McKay did that. But I think at the time, a lot of people were like, whoa, did not expect this from. Did he do Talladega Nights? Like the guy who did but like those Will Ferrell comedies. It's like
he might have wrote that.
But like, you wouldn't expect it from that guy, and I think that's
he
why
did direct. He did direct Talladega Nights.
Yeah, I'm like, you wouldn't expect this movie from Talladega Nights. So I think that's just a win in and of itself, even if it's not my favorite, just because of the subject matter too. I'm just, I like it, but it's not as engaging as some other movies because I'm more drawn to the subjects,
I think for me that's kind of another thing is watching it with Carrie. She's very in that sphere because of her work.
Yeah.
So that we're like sitting there, like I had to pause it a couple times and go, wait, what? And then she would explain something to me a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I had
think that's the thing is the style's fun and it keeps it exciting to watch. But I do also think maybe because it does move so fast, a mile a minute, yes, it's telling you a lot of information, but is it really conveying it thoroughly to where you can understand it? And I think that's a problem sometimes too, is like it's so about its style that sometimes it forgets like, no, some people just are not going to get this. But at the same time, I'm like, no, like I appreciate that he's like, you know what, some people aren't going to get it, but I'd rather give you something entertaining and absorbing than something that's a little bit more boring that you can just comprehend better. Because I think the more comprehensible version is just not as fun, not as engaging. So,
but I mean, in all, just to thinking about the movie though, it's like it's not just the audience doesn't get a lot of the subject matter. It's a lot of the people in the movie don't understand, and that's why it was able to be exploited so hard because it's such a confusing kind of thing. But just real quick to talk about, because you say this is a big transitional period for Adam McKay. It kind of feels like that, like when Quentin Tarantino made Inglourious Bastards, and it like he transitioned from one style of filmmaker to kind of like another, and start doing these like longer, kind of more epic style movies. I love to see that transition with him. And because he did that, because like you said, he's not just one trick pony, I'm kind of waiting to see if this ever happens, what Adam McKay's like epic, like Trump takedown is going to be. Because I feel like if anyone can do it other than like what South Park, I feel like, Adam McKay could be like the next big movie that comes out to take him down.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in line who would like that job, but I do think he's already proven it with Vice that he can take down a certain party in a way. But The Big Short, nominated for 5 awards, wins one big one, which is adapted screenplay. I think that's very well deserved. It's nominated also for picture, for director for Adam McKay, supporting actor for Christian Bale. That was the standout for the Academy in terms of the performances, and then film editing. But we did talk about how this is a director kind of reinventing themselves and kind of giving us something we'd never seen before from them. But now we're going to go back to a director who we've actually talked about 2 of the films in his pseudo trilogy. We've talked about Lincoln, we've talked about Munich, and this is kind of the third in his kind of historical trilogy. And that is Mr. Steven Spielberg, a frequent of the show, talking about one of his not lesser known works, but definitely lesser discussed works. Let's talk about, Chad, Bridge of Spies.
Yeah, Bridge of Spies, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Matt Charman, Joel Cohen, and Ethan Cohen. Wait, what? Cinematography by Janusz Kaminski, music by Thomas Newman, starring Tom Hanks, Mark Rylance, Amy Ryan, Alan Alda, Scott Shepard, Sebastian Koch, Austin Stowell, Billy Magnuson, Eve Husson, Jesse Plemons, and Noah Schnapp. That's right. Noah Schnapp is the little boy. Synopsis: a New York attorney helps negotiate the trade of 2 spies, but not before finding the humanity behind the label.
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it earlier, where like Adam McKay is doing something so fresh, so new, and like Steven Spielberg is kind of going back to the well. And that's not a bad thing. I think if a director is really good at something, like obviously, like do what you're good at. But it is interesting that after this, he then kind of goes into Ready Player One and goes into West Side Story and The Fabelmans, like these movies that are such big risks. The Fabelmans doesn't sound like a big risk, but it's his life story. It's Ready Player One is this big technological feat for him, and then obviously West Side Story, his first musical. So I feel like after this movie, he was kind of like, all right, I'm done doing my kind of like historical dramas about trying to understand the other side, which is what Munich is, which is also what Lincoln is, which is also what Bridge of Spies is. And then
still got
like
the Post though.
Yes, which I always forget about the Post, because the Post is so interesting because it kind of like it was an idea and it was made and it was produced and it was put out all in like the same year. It was like Trump got elected, we got to make this movie, boom, boom, boom. And I feel like that it kind of doesn't really like fit in this bubble of like trying to like understand the enemy necessarily, because it's all about like Trump sucks. It's told through a different lens, obviously not specific to Trump, but damn, we said his name so many times in the last few minutes. I'm like, ugh. But yeah, like I do think also just like yeah, this is a very interesting turning point after this. But I think this is like the last of like his like historical dramas for a little while. And it's interesting because I don't ever talk badly about the Berg here, but I do think this is a little underwhelming, I think, because it is kind of what we've seen before. And I do think, it's Tom Hanks again, it's Janusz Kaminski, I think I unplugged myself there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's what happens when I talk any badly about the Berg. Gets all whacked up. So I'm gonna let you talk, Chad, and then I'll chime in with more thoughts later.
Yeah. Well, and now you got to keep that gaff in. But I will say, yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like this movie, for some reason, I feel like there's so many like Spielberg movies where if they're not like the best movie you've ever seen, people just like trash on it. And it's like, people hold like Spielberg up to like such a high standard that like if they don't think it's like E.T. or Jaws level, they're going to be like, maybe that shouldn't even been nominated. But I think Bridge of Spies is actually pretty great. I like a lot of this movie, and every single time I watch it, I remember why I like it. And then, before that, I'll go, well, people really aren't like super high on Bridge of Spies, and they think like that might be the sole one that like shouldn't have been nominated or something like that. But I think it's pretty great. I like Mark Rylance in it. I like Tom Hanks in it. I think the idea of you have, someone who is sent to another country to, spy, collect information, and, I guess bring that back, kind of a deal. It, especially at those times, but also probably still, like, it's like, that is like a huge, like, offense that it's like the entire, community is or country is like against them and wants them to like be dead. But then you have one man who steps up and goes, look, I hear you, I understand that, but think about it. If it was like someone we sent over, and decided, to send over to spy on someone else, what happens to them? Would you want them to be killed over there, or would you want them to be sent back? Kind of a deal. And in fact, if we go ahead and just kill this guy, we might not have leverage in case something like that happens, and then that very same thing happens, which I don't know if that's like just like so convenient for the writing, but I do think that it creates like a very interesting predicament, very interesting thing just to look at, like Tom Hanks, who becomes at first kind of a pariah in society, and then when he expertly like negotiates this trade and like gets this done, where they get like 2 Americans for one shall I forget, like, what is he, German?
Russian. Yeah.
Spy. He's seen as kind of like a hero. And it's just really interesting to think about, especially now, where we like scapegoat people, we like label them, and then that's all they are now. And as we know, people are more than just one thing. Like right now, we have like a whole immigration thing, and it's like once you're labeled like an illegal immigrant or just an immigrant or anything like that, it's something that you can't live down now.
Yeah.
Or any other label that's put like kind of has a negative tint to it, where it's, this was someone who was actually doing something against our laws, and is actually trying to harm our country. So it's totally understandable to see people who are like so gung-ho, like we need to kill this guy and everything. But you get to see that kind of like nationalistic groupthink kind of thing, and how vicious that can be, to where you have like this American lawyer guy who's just doing his job, get his family threatened and stuff like that. And you can totally see that in politics today. If you step out of line against like what like a large group of people think, you might actually, your safety might be in danger. So I think this is a very interesting movie.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, is like it has so many interesting like interesting ideas, interesting concepts. And I do think that climax is just so thrilling. Like that like last 20 minutes where they're on the bridge and you're watching Mark Rylance take those first steps, and you're watching the other guy, and then it's like you're getting the call, the phone booth. I mean, that's kind of the Spielberg juice we love. It's like the editing and just the crisp and just seamless storytelling. The only thing is like, it's just like it's not a masterpiece on the level of Jaws and E.T., so it just doesn't get talked about in the same breath. And I even kind of, when I segued, kind of was like, oh, it's Spielberg just kind of phoning it in, but like that's just such a disservice to like the fact that it is still Spielberg, a director who is better than, in my opinion, every director ever, phoning it in. It's still going to be great. And I think that's the thing like we take for granted as Spielberg fans or just as film fans, is that like sometimes when these masters cook, they're really cooking, but even when they're just like making a salad, it's still a really good salad. Like it's not, you're not like putting the burner on, you're not baking anything. Maybe you make some croutons, but like I don't know. I think this is a really good salad. I think a lot of my beef with this film comes from Sylvester Stallone not winning for Creed, which nowadays in a Trump America of 2025, I'm okay with him losing an award. But at the same time, at the time, like for me, that was a no-brainer. Like that was the best supporting performance of the year, for men at least. And Alicia Vikander had 2 amazing supporting performances last 2015. But I do think, Mark Rylance winning, it was kind of like one of those blows that I was like, oh, this sucks. But I think now with time, I've been like, you know what? No, it's a really good performance, and he does make his mark. It is actually a smaller performance than I expected rewatching it. I'm like, he's really not in a ton of it. It is so Tom Hanks focused, but when he is there, I mean, you are captivated and want to watch Mark Rylance. So I think it's very consistent, and I think another thing is also like post Fablemans, I'm always trying to see like what of this film kind of harkens back to Spielberg's life and his childhood, and I think a lot of it is like kind of his own, you know, being a dad, like kind of seeing this character who's afraid to be a bad dad and afraid to fail, and kind of how that infuses into his work as well, and kind of seeing that perspective, because we've seen so much of like the neglected child, but now we're kind of getting the opposite end of him wanting to be a good dad, but either failing or fear of failing, which I think is important. And just the fact that you can tell an interesting war story without the violence also is very interesting. And when there is violence, it makes Tom Hanks throw up, and I think that's something really admirable, is that he's also using this as a way to kind of comment on war and violence, and wanting to make something that's not Saving Private Ryan. Because the last time we saw Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg make a war movie, Tom Hanks was, quite literally in the most graphic, gruesome, bloody war scene of all time, and now you're getting something that's just so opposite. But it shows, again, versatility on his end. In terms of like the little pseudo trilogy, I still think Munich is like just the most rich with all the themes, and probably the best made physically, like visually.
Mhm.
And I think just Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in Lincoln is so good that I might put this like third if we're ranking those three. But again, that does not take away from the fact that it's still Spielberg doing Spielberg and doing it very adequately. It's just not doing anything that we've that's going to necessarily blow our minds and surprise us, which is why I think some people are underwhelmed by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. Like, I can see why people, will kind of underestimate this, or, devalue it a little bit more. But, I think a super solid Spielberg movie is still probably going to be better than like most movies. So,
Yeah.
that's just what it is. But yeah, you talking about the fatherhood stuff. It's one hell of a thing to kind of think about. You doing something that is so important because you are in a position of power to like defend someone like this and try to like orchestrate a thing that people don't really understand, and it kind of like puts your family in danger. It's one hell of a thing to it's so important that you have to keep doing it so that it can succeed, that your family's in danger. I could never think about being like that important of a person with a very like controversial thing that my family would be in danger, and then like keep having to do that. It's just like such a interesting kind of concept, and I think they do it so well, so much so to where at the end when he finally gets home after it's done, he's just like passed out on the bed.
I love that ending.
Yeah. And then you have Holly from The Office, who is
Amy
just
Ryan,
kind of like looking at him.
Yeah.
But you talk about Mark Rylance. Yeah, I mean, I could say that I probably would have also picked Sly, pre Trump 2025 stuff.
Artist are separated. Yeah,
I probably
the
would
art speaks. Yeah,
pick Sly's performance there over Rylance as well. But I like Rylance's like subtle thing here, where he he does like the spy stuff very well in the beginning, and then like when you want to see like kind of like the humanity, like he's very like cold a lot of the times, because he's like I'm not afraid to die and stuff. But like when you get to him like on the bridge and he's talking to Tom Hanks, and he's like how will we know like kind of what is going to happen to you, and he's like, if they embrace me or if they just put me in the back of a car, kind of a deal. And I was like sitting there like afraid, like it's going to be such a gut punch if they're like, or if you like see like a in the back of the car or something, like they shoot him in the back of the car and you just see like a bright light go. I was like waiting for that. And just like, is that what's going to happen? Or if like, you hear in the news, like, and, this person was killed, as someone who's like, well, I mean, yeah, obviously they've done bad things to the country, but then like also kind of like the movie does such a good job at like, the humanity part of it, showing that this is also like a human being who's just doing what he was told to do. Kind of a deal. You might be okay with him like going to jail or something like that, but not like necessarily just straight up being murdered. But then again, I'm very like anti death and murder anyways,
Yeah.
so yeah.
No, yeah, that's very, very, very interesting. Just really quickly back to Mark Rylance. Yeah, like I love his mannerisms. I think he just
Yeah.
has such a great physicality. That is so fun. Like that whole opening. Like we talked about the opening and closing. Like I think this has such great bookends because it is so character driven. It's
Yeah.
Mark Rylance with his little coin and like all the little things, little spy things, and then at the end, Tom Hanks just like passing out on the bed. It's a very character focused movie in general. I mean, like there's not a lot of action in it. The whole second act. I think this is why it kind of like knocks down a peg for me in terms of Spielberg and just like this slate is just like that second act is a lot of just the same conversations happening again. It's just like maybe an extra detail is thrown in, but it's a lot of like, okay, maybe we could shorten this up. But I think the whole beginning and the whole ending are just so good that I'm like, you know what? No, like I do really like this one. Like I think this is one that grew on my estimations. I think if you were to ask me in 2015, this is probably my lowest ranking. It's not this time. So I'm very excited to see where it ranks for you because I think this is the one that kind of went up in my estimations the most. And then there's some movies that went down, but this is definitely one I think also just kind of seeing the Fablemans kind of understanding Spielberg as a person more. I've kind of come to terms with a lot of his interesting like little nuances with character, especially with fatherhood and parenting. That's just so fascinating to me every time. So Bridge of Spies, pretty good. Yeah, we like it. Nominated for 6 awards, wins 1, which is supporting actor for Mark Rylance, a big upset that night. It's also nominated for picture, original screenplay, original score, sound mixing, and production design. Where they have a lot of good bridges, Chad.
Brooklyn.
How do you know? Chad, tell us about Brooklyn.
Okay, compose. Brooklyn, directed by John Crowley, written by Nick Hornby, cinematography by Yves Belanger, music by Michael Brook, starring Saoirse Ronan, Domhnall Gleeson, Emery Cohen, Jim Broadbent, Julie Walters, Jessica Pear, Brid Brennan, Fiona Gascott, Jane Brennan, and Nora Jane Noon. Synopsis: an Irish woman immigrates to the United States for a new life and becomes torn between her old life and her new one. Based on Brooklyn by Colm Toblin.
Nice. Hey, listen, these Irish names they're tricky. They're tricky.
Hey, I got some of the more famous ones pretty down pat, I think.
I know everyone's like, you did Quiet Man last month. Guys, we recorded it like 5 months ago. So give us some grace. Chad, I want you to open with this because I have a lot to say about this movie, but I want you to talk about it first just to kind of get your thoughts out there before I kind of get on my little soapbox, if you will, and make a little bit of a tease, a social tease. But Chad, tell us, what do you think of Brooklyn?
Okay. I didn't know where you were going with that. I was like, do you hate this movie? I wasn't really sure.
Oh no.
Okay, so yeah, I'm excited to hear about it. I think Brooklyn's great. I think the first time I saw it, like I was kind of like wondering if it's just going to be like so slow, and it kind of is, but it's like really like you're talking about like character driven. It is one of those like very character driven because it's like all about this one character and like stuff. But I think it's so important to today because it's literally about an immigrant and how we're in the shoes of an Irish immigrant coming over. I think what's the 60s, and kind of seeing like what things are like where she is originally in Ireland, and then like what things are like in America, and kind of like how scary it is to come here. And just thinking about the idea of now like no one's coming here, and now it's like this thing where before it's like a great place of opportunity, and you can come here and like work and like learn how to assimilate to our culture, enrich it, kind of make it better. And then now it's like no, you have to be like this one thing, and you actually can't come here, and like no one wants to come here, and it's kind of like a mean place where everyone's kind of like put down and kind of like that. So it's like going back to a time in the 60s, it's like, make America great again. Like what? Like not like the 60s where you could actually come here and, be welcomed and, shown like, how new immigrants like assimilating into the culture can actually be a good thing. And how beautiful the relationship is between the Irish woman and the New York, Italian guy, and and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. I just think it's like a really great story of that, and just kind of her trying to figure out. I mean, it's a very very sad story in a lot of ways too, because she's leaving her home, she's taking a risk for maybe something different, and you get to see that. When she gets there and then she kind of misses home, she's very homesick, and then her sister dies, and that's like such a really heartbreaking, like crushing moment, because you realize like she'll never see her sister again. She had high hopes of like having like a great relationship with her sister, and then she goes back and she's like, I'm leaving my mom alone, and this is just not a great thing that I'm doing. And then she goes back and she just kind of sees her life there, and she sees how it could be with Donald Gleason's character, and she's like, maybe this could be great. And then she sees that one lady who is not great, and kind of like how things are there, and like the judgment and stuff like that, the negative stuff that she left, and going to her future where she's loved and accepted, and has found a new life. And I love how she makes that decision to go back, and that's kind of where I'm at, I guess, for now. I want to hear what you
Yeah,
have
no.
to
No, I love hearing it, and just hearing you talk about it. I'm like, yeah, like I just love this movie for so many reasons. Yeah, like I kind of teased, when we were like catching up, like, oh, what's new with you? What's new with you? And I'm like, oh, there's like personal developments and stuff. I've been seeing someone that's kind of like one of
Yeah.
those things that all the hosts know behind the scenes. Who, not gonna name names right now, not gonna like say labels or anything, just because this is something that I hope evolves and grows and blossoms and blooms, but just for the sake of like this show being timeless, and also just wanting to respect her privacy, I'm gonna keep that anonymous for now. But who knows, give it some time. She may be a guest on the show someday. But I do think it's very interesting, because like watching this movie, I was watching it, and like the kind of subtle realization watching this movie is that like I'm kind of living that right now, just in the fact that like, I mean, obviously I'm the Italian guy in this situation, but kind of seeing this movie about this person who kind of not necessarily sheltered, but is coming from a very specific cultural bubble. The person I'm seeing, she's, from a state, a very similar, a lot of similar people, similar religions, similar upbringings. She only went to college 40 minutes from her house. Like she kind of lived in like the same
Mm,
bubble her whole life, dated the same types of people, kind of was kind of living not mundanely, obviously, because she loves where she comes from, and I
mm,
think that's an important part of this film as well. But you know coming here and doing this cruise, and meeting someone like me who's like very different. I'm this guy from the New York, New Jersey area. I'm Italian. I'm not like all the
hey,
other people she's dated. I think that's kind of where this movie just rang so true to me, in the fact that it's like you still have to cherish where you came from, and you still have to acknowledge
yeah,
that, and appreciate that, and you still have these bonds that cannot be broken, specifically familial bonds. Like how much she admires her family is one of the things I like about her the most, is the fact that she loves her family. She's so family oriented, and like she would do anything for her family, and it does make her very homesick, as does it make I'm very homesick as well. But just seeing like this whole movie kind of tackle that idea of like meeting someone new that's not necessarily what you've ever had before, but just having that connection that you can't really speak on. Like sure, it probably makes more sense for her to be with the Irish guy. It makes more sense to like go back to Ireland and just do what she's comfortable with. But no, she's like, I want to make this choice to kind of set this new life for myself, still acknowledge what I had before, but kind of follow my heart. And I think that's kind of just been like what I've been living for so long now on this cruise, is just the idea of meeting someone who maybe she comes from a very different background than me, but we just connect over so many different reasons, and it's just so like cool to see that kind of on screen as well, and to show that like the right decision is following your heart. It's not, is it this guy? Is it this guy? It's her decision. And the fact that she's able to make that choice for herself and not feel like society has to dictate it. And like, I think most movies would end with her picking the Italian guy because it's what's different. It's what's needed. It's what's fresh. It's what's new. But if she went back to the Irish guy, that'd be, kind of validating too, because it's like that's her decision, it's her choice. And I think this movie is just kind of about coming of age and kind of figuring out who she is. And that kind of just reminds me so much of what like my current like love situation is, because it's like, we're kind of finding out who we are as individuals, kind of separated from our little bubbles back home, but also kind of meeting someone from a totally different mindset, a totally different world, a totally different a part of the world, and just kind of connecting over something something so similar, being our personalities, our love of families, but also acknowledging that we come from very different backgrounds. But I think that this movie also gives a glimmer of hope in the fact that like you don't have to be, her religion, her, state. You don't have to come from where she comes from. You don't have to like have lived every single ounce of the same experience shared in someone's shoes to connect with someone. You can also enjoy finding those differences and enjoying those differences, and finding the opposites that then attract and are able to like kind of create this really great relationship. And I just think that's just been so fun to kind of watch this movie and to see all that kind of mirrored. Obviously she's not from Ireland, it's not that on the nose. She does play a Scottish princess in the musical. She plays Merida in Brave. But I do think it's one of those things where it's like, so there you go. If you know who it is, you know who it is. But it's like one of those things just so interesting, because it's like, just seeing this movie talk about, yes, a love triangle, but just kind of who you are, and you trying to take your independence, but also try to find something that is different and fresh and new, and just learning how to kind of write your own story in a way, but also the acknowledging of the past. It's something that a lot of great movies that aren't even romances do too. Just like, Paddington in Peru, another example, like acknowledging where you came from, but understanding that this new thing you have is your new family, is your new love, is your new, kind of path forward. Yes, he could have stayed in Peru, but he decided to go back to the Browns. Sorry, spoiler alert, that movie, but that movie also, it could have been easy to say, what, this is where I was supposed to be all along, was back home where I came from. But also, like, there's something beautiful to be said about like learning to kind of fly free and away from the nest a little bit. But yeah, it's just really cool that like this is just such like a raw and like relatable experience to me. And the movie itself is good, but like it doesn't blow me away or anything in its style or in its filmmaking or anything, or even its writing. But it's just like really well done, really well acted. I think the characters are charming. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I mean, it's her deciding between this like perfectly pleasant Italian guy or this perfectly pleasant Irish guy, like, oh, the choice is so hard. But it's not about that. It's not about which guy she prefers as much as it is, trying to kind of figure out her own identity and what she wants to take with her and what she wants to leave behind. And kind of this Tony guy being like this glimpse of something new and fresh, and kind of setting forth her path as like an individual and an independent woman. But she also has a connection with him. But also, like, yeah, she hits it off with Domhnall Gleeson too, because he's just like a good guy and he reminds her of home. And that's a thing too. Like, sometimes you're going to have those cravings for something back home, but not needing to necessarily marry yourself to being back home all the time. You need to learn how to grow and move forward, and I feel like that's the same with a lot of married couples, not just my specific situation, but a lot of people kind of, okay, what do I want to take with me? What do I want to leave behind? What do I want to move forward with? What do I want to bring forward with me? So anyway, that's all my updates. Not anything crazy, but that's the thing, this movie isn't anything crazy. I mean, it's not anything, there's not any huge like betrayals, or no one cheats, or no one like lies, no one deceives. It's very clean cut. But I think that's what I appreciate about it. It's just a woman trying to just like navigate this new chapter of her life, and it just so happens that it's with an Italian guy from my area, which kind of makes it a little bit more relatable for me. But yeah, that's kind of it. I like this movie a lot.
I mean, I love hearing like the personal touch to it. It's kind of like a really cool thing that like, just as this new relationship for you is kind of blossoming, you watch a movie that like you connect with so much from 10 years ago, and you're just like, now this movie hits way different for you than it probably did in 2015. So that's just such a really cool touch. I love when you have movies that kind of hit like how E.T. hit different for me, being a father now, and stuff. So it's just kind of cool to see that. With this movie, like you're saying, it is kind of simple in that way, but it's like as simple it is for us to watch, it's such a difficult choice for her to make, because she sees the different lives that she could lead. But you don't get multiple lives, or at least we don't know if we get multiple lives necessarily. You know, if you ask David Lynch, maybe, you know, might be different. Maybe you live multiple times. But you know, right now you have to make one choice, and it's, do you stay and be with that guy at home, or do you know, kind of go with the more adventurous thing? But I love how they have like the kind of thing where they don't make Donald, like you said, they don't make Donald Gleason like
A
this
villain.
piece of shit guy, like,
Yeah.
you know, like he could have easily had like a villain turn at the very end, like, you know, like the Hans from, you know, Frozen or whatever, where he just has like a quick turn and then is like kind of a piece of shit, and then you're just like, oh well, then she should leave. No, she actually has to make that choice despite, like, you know, knowing that her life with him there in Ireland, not that like all of her decisions have to be dependent on what man she's going to be with. But I know like the 60s were a lot different too, with, you know, kind of like that sensibility too. It's like, you know, your life is dependent on what man you're going to be with. But, you know, this movie is kind of like, you know, driven in, you know, not just the man that she's going to be with, but with where she sees her life being like the most rich. And I love how, you know, she sees it there in Ireland, but then she sees all of the negative stuff too. And then even though, you know, going to a new place like America is kind of scary and, you know, like complex and like a really large, you know, thing to learn how to assimilate to a new place like that, she finds comfort in, you know, her love for this guy in New York, who is like, you know, like the sweetest guy, and, you know, just kind of very unassuming. He's very like, you know, what do you call it? Like
Innocent.
innocent. He's not really full of himself or anything. He's just kind of like, I love you. Do you like me? You know, I don't have like that much going for me or anything like that necessarily. Like, I'm just a plumber from Brooklyn, but, you know, I love you, kind of a deal. And that's enough, you know, to, you know, and I love seeing their relationship develop. And there's the image of like him, like kind of going about his day, and then he just sees her standing there, and that's such a brilliant, like, you know, last kind of final, one of the final shots, kind of like, you know, Tom Hanks laying on the bed after everything.
Yeah, because it's also like, I think in that moments where you realize what her choice is, I think until then it's still like, what is she gonna do? I like what you said about like, you know, it shouldn't be driven by a man. It is her decision though, and it's just part
It
of
is,
her kind of coming to terms with her identity. But I think the men just represent just life in general, like not necessarily romance, but just like, do you want what you've always had that you're comfortable with, or do you want to try something new? Knowing it's scary, knowing it's different, knowing it's a big adjustment, but also knowing that it gives you some more independence, that you always still have what you had. You know, that doesn't take away from what you had before. And I think that's been a big part about what we've been navigating too, is understanding like, this is new, this is fresh, but like, this doesn't negate anything that's happened before where you come from. Because family is still so important to both of us. And I think that's why the stuff with the sister and her going back home is so important too, because it does show that like, yes, you can leave somewhere, but that's still always your home in a way. You know, you can have more than one home. It's just home means different things. Home and house are two different things. You know, heart and love, you know, there's a lot of differences and nuances in life that are sometimes just like mundane. Sometimes it's a modest guy. Sometimes it's a very humble, normal person. Maybe it's just two normal guys. You know, maybe you don't need the villain, and I kind of think that's refreshing in a way. Does it make it more boring? Maybe for some, maybe yeah. But for a hopeless romantic who is also kind of just like your average guy, I like it. I'm down for it. You know, and that's the thing. It's that's a real thing. You know,
it is interesting in the way that it's kind of like a period piece that like you're just seeing it as, you know, like this is very complex for her, and like today it would be so different, because like today if she misses home she could just FaceTime with her mom in Ireland. But like then it was like a much bigger, like then going to America for her is like, you know, saying goodbye to her mom forever almost, because she's picking her life there. You know, today it might be like way different. I feel like travel's easier, You know, you could easily just, hey mom, yeah, America's cool, do a TikTok or I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
Great movie.
I really like it. Again, it's you can't really talk too much about like the filmmaking. Like we're about to jump into a film that's all about its technicals and its story and everything. It's just like a culmination of everything. This is just a very simple, very pleasant film. But I do think if you're watching it at the right point in your life, like this was just very eye opening for me. Also to kind of give myself the assurance that it is okay to pursue something like this because it's like you're two very different backgrounds, trying to come together, and it's like that leap of faith of just hoping, it's not just a cruise fling, hoping it's like something more and something real. And then seeing a movie like this, you can be like, okay, like, no, like it can work out. This is a normal thing. You sometimes, you meet people you didn't ever expect to meet, ever expect to come in your life. You just had that connection, and even just like the conversations we've had, like, would you be comfortable like dating outside your religion or dating, this person from this side of the world or this type of person, and I just think that's a lot of what this movie is just kind of figuring out what she wants and just kind of just figuring out who she is. And I think it's fantastic. So Brooklyn, 3 nominations, doesn't win a single one, but it is winning in my heart. But it is nominated for picture, actress for Saoirse Ronan, and adapted screenplay. Oddly enough, not her first nomination. It was the first time I knew who she was. First time I took notice of her, but she was already nominated for Atonement, so she's already got 2 nominations under her belt here. But what has 10 nominations? A franchise rejuvenator, restarter, re-engager. The engine's back on. We're driving. We're cruising along. Here we go. Mad Max Fury Road, the big one. Chad, tell us about Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh yeah. Mad Max Fury Road, directed by George Miller, written by George Miller, Brendan McCarthy, and Nico Lathoris. Cinematography by John Seal and music by Junkie XL. Starring Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult, Hugh Keys Byrne, Josh Hellman, Nathan Jones, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, Zoe Kravitz, Riley Keough, and Abby Lee. Synopsis: an epic car chase begins in a dystopian wasteland when persecuted women attempt to flee from a vicious dictator who has hijacked and withheld the water source from the public.
Yeah. So not many people have heard of this movie or seen this movie, so we got to give them a little bit deeper of a synopsis. I'm kidding. Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, it's the one everyone's excited to hear about, but I also find with like slates like this where there's one movie that is kind of like genuinely regarded as the masterpiece, sometimes it's hardest to talk about that movie because it's all good. And I think this is the case where it's all good. Like I have no complaints, no notes. But Chad, tell us, because I know you love this movie. I do too, but I think you love it even more than I do, just because you rave about this movie every time someone mentions it or even breathes it. But what do you think of Mad Max Fury Road, Chad?
Yeah, it's not one that I think like I was floored with like the very first time I saw it, but it's one that like really grew on me because like, I was like kind of really wowed by, because I'm not like a huge like classical Mad Max fan. Like I've seen some of the original ones, but like, I don't really find them like insanely watchable or anything. But I think this one is, just like George Miller taking what he wanted to do back then with his more like gritty version of Mad Max, but then transitioning to this one where he could like really, have, I guess, like the budget and the time and whatever to and knowledge to make, these like big elaborate practical set pieces or cars or whatever, and just like really kind of like film this in such a way that I think it's like, truly, truly incredible. And just like, even if you aren't like into the story or the characters or anything like that, just watching this take place is just like otherworldly, where it's like, how did you manage to do this? Like, it's mostly all practical, and it's like, just that feat alone is just, truly breathtaking and awe inspiring. But and this is like something that, because I didn't really get a lot of the substance part of it, like when I first watched it. And then I had to slowly kind of see more of the like the political ramifications, the substance with the characters and the emotion. And everything that's like mixed in that takes this from just a really fun action movie to just like one of those movies that should be nominated for Best Picture, maybe even win, and just be like one of those like all-time like new age like classics of like one of those like epic movies that's super action but also really deep as well.
Yeah.
And I love the whole society that they set up. It's really kind of weird the way like people dress. It's very macabre in a lot of ways. You have people like very like sick and diseased, and just kind of how they show that, or how they show like people's style of having like weird like nipple piercings and stuff like that. You're like, wait, what?
Or
But
like, yeah.
Also to see the without all of the style, the substance too of just like a crazy dictator like withholding the water from people, and like so they basically treat him as like a god, because he has the water, he has the resources and stuff. And then you have the woman who's fed up, who's not gonna have any of that, and has to like save these other women. And then you have Mad Max, who has his own like trauma that he's dealing with, and you see all of the flashes of like his daughter and stuff, all like kind of converging. And then you have in my favorite part of the movie, which is oh shit, what is his name? Nux, thank you. Which is a war boy, who is they're all kind of crazy and kind of like in this zone of they have to die for they're really badass. They have to spray paint their face, witness me, and die for like in such a really crazy way to go to Valhalla and be recognized as something great. But he realizes that it's kind of all a facade, that it's all just a lie given to them so that they will do things for this dictator. And then you get to see him actually turn around and sacrifice himself, not for that guy, but for the people who are trying to save themselves and also save the society, because they like turn around and they end up going back and actually taking control, killing the dictator, and releasing the water to the people. And it's just such a without the style, I think people could see more of the substance of it, but I think the style is also what makes the movie so damn watchable and great. So it's a lot of things rolled into one. It's just a really epic, phenomenal movie.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people just kind of like downplay it and just say, well, they go one way and then they go back the other way. It's like a car chase. It's just one big car chase. But yeah, it is a journey. And I do think the style is the substance in a way. Like I feel like even in the action, you're getting a lot of this like feminist messaging, because it's a lot of the women kind of taking the reins and being the resourceful ones, being the ones to change the men. And like, not to say that Max isn't like a good ally, obviously, but like even Max at first is has to kind of change his tune, and Nux as well. And I think it's really just admirable to have a movie that is so machismo in its overall like presentation of what machismo normally is, but infusing it with so many feminist themes, having this really great central Furiosa character, but also just like being like this just captivating spectacle as well. I mean you say take away the style and what is it, but like the style can be the substance, and I think this is the case where it is. And I really do think just the practical sets like you were talking about are just so phenomenal, just the way they're able to like just make things explode and actually tumble on themselves. It's a reason why I didn't love Furiosa as much, the movie, just because it's like it felt a little bit more digital, and I know that was kind of the look they were going for, because it was a little bit more of a fairy tale of like this like tale of the past, of this legend, this mythology, whereas this is more just like stone cold, hard, gritty action. And the thing is, it doesn't hold back in that. It understands it is an action movie, and it does deliver. It's not trying to like, when it wants to get deep and emotional, it takes a backseat to the action. There's maybe one sequence where there's not like current action going on, and it's one of the most beautiful emotional scenes of the movie, but even then it's still rooted in this underlying tension and suspense and dread and fear of the unknown, and goals and ambitions that I think is so masterful. Like everything has such a through line in both the action and visual presentation, but also the thematic stuff. Like it all feels like it's so well connected and well harmonized. It never feels like it's at odds with one another. It never feels like they're forcing the messaging into the action or that they're overwhelming the messaging with the action. It all feels like it's so simpatico, so compatible the
Yeah.
entire way through. And I really do love how it is very basic in its overall setup, premise, and like construction layout. Like you're going one way, oh, that's not what we need. We need to go back to the source. We go the other way. But it's just like it's all about the journey, not the destination. And I think that's
Yeah.
the epitome of this movie. Both in its action and just the fact that it is the same set piece the whole time where it's like it's one big car chase, but it doesn't feel boring. Like it doesn't feel like, okay, we've seen this before. It doesn't feel like every scene is just kind of rehashing what we've already gone through. The goals and everything kind of stays pretty much the same. There's still a clear objective, but I feel like every action sequence delivers something new and surprising where you're like, whoa, you did that now too. You did this. Now you did that. Now you did that. It just keeps delivering and it keeps firing on all cylinders, quite
Yeah.
literally. I mean, the fire in this thing too, just the explosions, the effects, the color. There is not a flaw. Like I really do think this is a flawless film, and I
Wow.
think it's hard to find it. And the only flaw is that maybe continuity wise, it doesn't work as well in the context of the other movies. It might feel like a bit of a technical and like visual outlier. I haven't seen the other movies, so I can't speak on that. So I'm not
Mm.
even going to say that's a flaw. But I do think a lot of people who might have like liked the style of the old Mad Max movies might be a little bit like, okay, there's a little bit of a different take. Like maybe I don't love this. Some people have said Tom Hardy's performance is a little too subdued. I don't
Mm.
mind it. I think it's cool to have a main character who's a little bit more quiet because guess what? Sometimes people are quiet, and if they're making a movie about me, he's gonna be a chatterbox. But maybe they're gonna make a movie about someone else who's not, and like that's just how it is. But yeah, like as someone who's seen the other Mad Max movies, is it a big departure or does it feel like a natural like evolution? Because we talked about it with Top Gun as well. Like the first Top Gun and the second one, they're both action spectacles, but the second one is just so much crisper, so much cleaner. Just takes these bigger risks, and that's why it stood out more. But is this kind of in line with the style of the first three, or is it a big departure?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I can really only talk about style because I don't really remember a lot of the story, from
Right.
like the original ones.
But I
But
can tell you, it's
yeah,
definitely an evolution there from what I've heard.
yeah. But just like talking about the style, like it's just so different because it's like it feels like bigger.
Mhm.
That's what it kind of like where I mentioned Quentin Tarantino earlier, where it's like you go from something like Pulp Fiction to Glorious Bastards, or even Django Unchained, where it's like one is like kind of like a small gritty movie, and then this other one is like this sprawling kind of epic movie where it still has like the same kind of like filmmaker touches to it, but it's just like very different type of movie and how it's filmed and helmed. And I feel like Mad Max from the originals are a lot more like enclosed and like you're more shots like inside the cars, and it's just really they're just filming like regular cars driving. Here they're like monster trucks and big trucks, and with stilts on people on stilts, and some dude playing guitar and just like being thrown around on the car, and everything's so uh what do you call it, dynamic and just moving
Mhm.
around and stuff. So it's just two totally different like styles. So I think that's pretty great. I did want to touch on you're talking about like how people kind of will sometimes try to minimize it a little bit by saying like, oh well, they just go in a circle. This it's NASCAR, they just go in a circle. But I feel like talking about how it's the journey and talking about why it doesn't matter that they're going in a circle.
Mhm.
They've grown and changed, and the place that they left has changed since then. It's kind of like when people go like, oh, what The Shape of Water, is that the fish sex movie or whatever? So it's kind
Yeah.
of like you can kind of trivialize anything no matter how great it is if you really wanted to. But regardless, this movie has like some of like the best shots in cinema that's like artwork,
Yeah.
like when they go into the
Big dust cloud.
yeah, the dust cloud, and that's nuts. The shot of like I think Charlize Theron kind of you know uh super sad, like on her knees, just
in the sand. Yeah.
that whole
It's
thing.
funny you say these things and like, yeah, like the image is so clear in my mind.
Yeah,
Like this
yeah,
really does create so many great images. And again, it's impressive because this movie does move. Like it never really stops. I mean, it stops occasionally, but it is a movie that's so kinetic, so 100% of the way through, just like moving, moving, moving. Yet
yeah,
you still can like pick out these great shots, and I think that's a testament to George Miller as a director to be able to like compose something that works in movement, but also still at the same time. That you can like really just like take a screenshot of and be like, wow, cinema, but also like watch a 5-minute video of and be like, wow, moving cinema.
mhm.
Which is so good, so good.
Yeah. The two other things I wanted to touch on is that uh, we talked about the machismo side, and also it's a very feminist movie. I kind of like how I think this plays into the whole feminist thing, where it's not that it's machismo, like macho, super like testosterone. Despite the feminists, I feel like it all works together because
Mhm.
like the female characters in the movie are often like kind of like they're really like in charge of what's going on.
Yeah,
Like you see like the badass, because you think like man, really badass and testosterone and like yeah, but like the women I feel like are so like you find the group of like badass women that Charlize Theron like her or like her like family I think, or like where she kind of comes from, she like meets those people and like they come in and they're really badass and taking
yeah,
charge and like firing guns and like doing all this stuff. And then Charlize Theron herself, even more than Mad Max, is like so like action like oriented, like an action star, driving the big truck, fighting. She's the one that kills what's his face,
Morton Joe.
Morton Joe, and stuff. So yeah, so I think like it's really great to see women characters like that who are not passive, even like the ones in like the flowy dresses who are being protected and stuff, are they also fight, like Zoe
Yeah,
Kravitz and stuff. They'll kick and fight when they need to. So yeah, I think that's a great point to say that not only is it super macho, but it's also very feminist
yeah.
and and it kind of has all of that wrapped up in one thing.
Yeah, because you look at some of those like kind of grindhouse or like machismo, like very like masculine films. The women are usually there as like set dressing or like things to look at or victims, and they're victims in this sense, but like victims for the hero to save. But I
Yeah,
like how it is like victims who take it back themselves and
yeah.
really take their power. If anything, Max is the one who's kind of strung along. He's
Mhm.
there, he's used by them, obviously, but one last thing I'll say, like George Miller, similar to George Lucas with Star Wars, it's like, yeah, you can knock the writing for Star Wars, whatever, but like the way he just has this world so fleshed out, and like I'm not talking about like Lord of the Rings because that's like based on a book, but like just like in your own brain, you could just come up with all these different things for the screen, these different shapes and images, and like in Star Wars' sense, the ships and the droids and the aliens and the species and the planets. Here, it's like just like the different designs, like you were talking about the style, the piercings, the tattoos, just like the different casting types too. Like they have every single type of person cast in this movie too. They don't discriminate. Not everyone looks like a movie star, like some action movies where everyone
Yeah,
has these like chiseled bodies. Like, no, the bodies are so diverse, the body image, the color, just the way their makeup is. What is skin makeup, what is like actual like white makeup, like the little like gray spray paint they put on their faces, like all these little things that like aren't all explained, but it's like it's accepted. We as the
yeah,
audience accept it as like this is how this is in this world. And
yeah.
I think that's just
Lived
so
in.
impressive
Yeah.
that you don't have to like big short your way through it and say, so this is why they're painting their faces. Like I really think it's so cool that we could just kind of like accept what it is. Why does he have a breathing device? I don't know. And even Star Wars explains that. It's like Anakin gets burned. That's why he needs the breather as Darth Vader. This one, Morton Joe's just scary. That's it. They don't need to say like this happened to him and that's why he needs this respirator. Bada bada bada. Like I really do like how it is so just lived in already, and you don't need to like literally get all this exposition. You could just kind of understand what it is, and just the way they also incorporate such like interesting things into the action, like the blood bank with like the tube of blood, just like being just like a little obstacle that like he has to overcome. And when he bites it off, and like, everything is just so good. I
I,
love it.
I was just thinking like I was just thinking like, Dylan releases this episode of Picture This, and then right after it's announced the Immortan Joe prequel.
Oh my gosh, how he got his breathing device. Maybe. I mean, that's what Furiosa kind of was, I guess. They announced a prequel. And
Yeah.
we obviously won't talk about that, but it is very interesting. Even watching that movie, which is great, but like at the end, just being like, but it's not Fury Road. It's just
Yeah.
not. There's just something
Yeah.
about this that can't be replicated in a way that like Top Gun, they can make a third one. It's just not going to be Maverick. It's one of those things where when you have a movie defy expectations like this, like what, just the fact that Mad Max Fury Road, a Mad Max movie, is a Best Picture nominee, let alone the most winning film of the night, is crazy. Like it really is crazy to think about. If you had told me in 2014 that a sequel to a 3-film Mad Max Mel Gibson franchise is by the guy who made Babe and Happy Feet is going to be this Oscar darling, like forget it. Same thing I said about Top Gun. Like there's going to be movies that just come out that you're like, wait, what? Like it's crazy, and it's just such a cool thing that like the Academy will occasionally just be like, no, it's just great, we got to nominate it,
Yeah. That being said, just the last thing that I wanted to add was that, like I said, Nux is my favorite character from this, and I just love Nicholas Holt's performance so much. His arc is everything to me, and like when you get him at the end, you think that he might end up, joining them and stuff. But then when the circumstances have that where he has to actually sacrifice himself to help them. And his final, witness me moment has so much weight that it just makes me cry. And I just like, anyone who says this just doesn't have substance, I'm like, dude, that final witness me with Nicholas Holt's performance, I can't. It's just so good.
Have you seen X-Men 97 yet?
I've seen the first season.
Yeah, it's the same thing as the Gambit. Remember it. It's just like those like it's that underappreciated hero that is kind of the bad boy, kind of the misfit, but then like they have this big sacrificial moment, and you're like, you're just crying. That reminded me of it. Also because like remember it and witness me are two very similar phrases, but alas, Mad Max Fury Road, 10 nominations, 6 wins. It's 60% on the day. It wins sound editing, sound mixing, production design, makeup and hair, costume design, film editing. It's nominated for but doesn't win. Somehow, director Georgia Miller does not win, which is obscene. It's also nominated for picture, cinematography, and visual effects. I at least understand those ones because, picture, cinematography, I get why the Revenant beat it for cinematography. Visual effects, we've already talked about. Ex Machina winning is pretty cool, but just losing director for George Miller, just like, you might as well send me off to Mars. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Put me on a planet and leave me alone. Just kidding. Really bad segue because it's actually kind of tragic what happens to Matt Damon in The Martian. But that's my segue to The Martian. It wasn't very clean. We needed one bad segue. But Chad, tell us about The Martian.
Yep, The Martian, directed by Ridley Scott, written by Drew Goddard of Buffy fame, cinematography by Darius Wolski, music by Harry Gregson Williams, starring Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, Kristen Wiig, Jeff Daniels, Michael Pena, Sean Bean, Kate Mara, Sebastian Stan, Axel Henney, Mackenzie Davis, Benedict Wong, Donald Glover, Chin Shu, Eddie Ko, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Nick Mohammed. Synopsis: an astronaut is stranded on Mars and must find a way to survive long enough to hopefully be rescued. Based on The Martian by Andy Weir.
Very nice. Yeah, like you were just rattling off all those names. I'm like, name a more stacked just cast on paper. I don't think you can. But yeah, we haven't really talked a ton about Ridley Scott on this show.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of his movies are. I don't know if we've ever talked about Ridley Scott. I got to think about it because the Alien, Blade Runner, they didn't get nominated. Obviously, The Last Duel was a recent one that didn't get nominated. We didn't see Black Hawk Down get nominated. We will talk about Gladiator eventually, but he really isn't much of an Oscar darling, which is kind of surprising given he's like one of the greatest directors of all time, in my opinion. But also just has one of the best resumes of all time. Even if you're not a big fan of his direction, like you can't deny making Alien and Blade Runner makes you a legend. Like that alone, done.
Yeah.
But I do feel like unlike Spielberg, he does when he has his lows, really has his lows. But I think when he has his highs, it's like some of the best movie making you'll see. So I'm curious what you think of The Martian, where that falls for you, because this was one that was very widely embraced, but he also doesn't get nominated for it, right? Ridley Scott. So maybe he's still undervalued, underappreciated. But we haven't talked about Ridley Scott a lot on the show, so I want to know your thoughts on just Ridley, and then we can talk about The Martian. But because I know how you feel about Alien, the original Alien, but I also know how you feel about Blade Runner. But we haven't talked a lot about him extensively beyond that. I haven't even seen like Thelma and Louise. That's a big blind spot of mine. So I know. But yeah, Ridley Scott, very interesting. Just such an up and down filmography. When he hits, he hits. When he misses, he misses. But this was a big one for him. The Martian was like his last huge hit. I think so. What do you think of this one, Chad?
Well, I mean, Ridley Scott in general, I think, I mean, he's one of those that he's a great filmmaker. I remember critically acclaimed the podcast. I remember they had a really good point where they said when Ridley Scott gets a great script, he generally makes a great movie, but he's not a director who's going to like necessarily elevate a bad script or a mediocre script. So it's like when you give him great material, he's going to put his own style and like really elevate the great material. And so I think that kind of makes Ridley Scott like, yes, he is a great director, but I think he's a little bit uneven a lot of the times as far as like not like with Spielberg. I think like even his like mediocre kind of movies are still like known to be like good movies. With Ridley Scott, I don't think that's really the case. Like there's some people who hate Prometheus and like Alien Covenant and stuff.
Oh gosh,
like,
yeah, I don't want to know those people.
That's what I'm saying is like there's the reception of it is like he has great movies and then kind of a thing. I think that's the perception of it. I think The Martian is kind of perceived as being one of those great movies. I'm not in love with The Martian. I like it. I like it a lot. I think it is a very well-made movie. I think it's a really, really good story. I like Matt Damon in it. I do think it's basically just Matt Damon being Matt Damon in this movie, though. But kind of this concept of it's science fiction. It's science fiction, kind of posing as like a real story, which is a little bit kind of weird to think about because it's like it has very similar vibes to it that we covered at Apollo 13 did. And it has a lot of those moments like the him getting saved and the applause and the how are we going to save him kind of a thing versus like it's a disaster movie. Something went wrong to get him in this predicament and then he has to figure out how to do it. It's got like the kind of silly like fan pleasing moments of him in the car like singing
disco music.
And so it's kind of like that, and with just me watching it, I'm like not really getting much out of him sitting here.
Whoa,
like
the kitty cat
fight. Hey,
kitty cat fight. Maybe we should just like play some disco music here just to fill the time. There we go. All right, that was your disco fix. Sorry, Chad. We're back.
But yeah, it's just a little bit jarring, I think, because it is such a fictitious movie to even think about like the idea of like how this could be, because apparently like going to Mars would take you way longer than I think these people actually were like in it for. But you do get like the really like cool like sequences of them leaving, thinking he's dead, finding out that he's not, and like people revealing to them that he's not dead, and then they have to sit there and like kind of like have that like moral quandary of like do we go back? Do we leave him there? How long is he going to be there if we leave him there? Are we going to die trying to go get him? Are we, even if we do go get him, it's guaranteed that we're not going to see our families for a lot longer. So it is a whole thing. But then they like rally and they go, "Fuck it, let's go get him. We have to go get him. I don't give a shit about anything else. We have to." So yeah, I love a lot of that. I love the moral stuff. I think the science stuff is really cool, like when they talk about it, and all the political stuff as well, that they're talking about, like how like NASA works and stuff. I like how they have to call in Donald Glover halfway through the movie, who's kind of like this guy that people are like, who the hell is this guy? And he's like really smart. So it has kind of like a lot of the same vibes as like Apollo 13. But then it also does have a lot of the kind of like populist style of Matt Damon's really likable, and people want to see him singing in the Humvee or whatever, and like talking to the thing. I don't know if it necessarily gets a lot of the dread of it, like really, really, really accurate, or like maybe the situation. Although I do think Matt Damon sells it pretty well. And just like with Gravity, when they're actually like performing the thing, and they have like him outside of the spaceship, like flinging around in the air, and they have to like figure out like the precise thing of like catching him and like pulling him in and stuff, and all that is really tense, and they do that really well. So yeah, I think it's a very well made movie that I really like. Maybe not love on the same like level as some other people, but there's a lot in it. It's a really fun watch, and I like to see him like planting stuff and like doing all that. And he's like I forget what he says, like I'm the first person to cultivate Mars or something, colonize Mars or something like that.
Because he's the first person to plant something on Mars. He's technically a colonizer. I agree with you. I really like it, but like I'm not quite at the love it stage. I used to love this movie. Like when this came out, I was obsessed. Not obsessed, but like I loved it. I was like, wow, that's so good. But I think it's also because like when you're 17 years old, like something like this is really refreshing. It's like it's dealing with a lot of science. Like it has a lot of good ideas and like really interesting science stuff, even if it doesn't all make sense, and some of it's a little far-fetched, obviously, but like just like planting potatoes out of your poop, like that's just like a really interesting concept. And like yes, they dig at it and they make jokes about it. And I think the biggest thing about The Martian over time, the legacy's kind of become, is it a comedy or not? Because the Golden Globes famously gave it the award for best comedy, and I think there was like a huge uproar. Like even to this day, you watch a Dan Murrell video talking about category fraud, you're gonna get a comment about The Martian being a comedy. That's just something that like people just love to like dig on The Martian for, or the Golden Globes for. It's like, this is not a comedy, because it's such a dire, such a dense, dramatic situation. It's not a comedy. It's a drama about a funny guy and like a funny set of circumstances. And yes, the disco music is funny, but honestly, like watching it, at least in the context of all these other films too. I mean, like even Mad Max, it's very intense, and Bridge of Spies is dramatic, Brooklyn's dramatic, The Revenant's dramatic, Room's dramatic, Spotlight's dramatic. The Big Short, I would say, is a little bit more comedy skewing, but even then dealing with some heavy shit. Like this is the light fare of the group. This is the kind of more like energized, light, kind of fanciful, fun time. But I do agree, like I don't think it's a comedy. I think what's so interesting about it is that like it's a movie about, it's a drama about a guy who uses comedy as a coping mechanism, who kind of like uses it as a way to kind of keep himself sane in this crazy world. And I think that's the thing, is like, that's a lot of people, they use comedy as like a shield, as a mask, as a way of kind of coping and a way of healing and a way of trying to overcome something that's very difficult. And I think that's why I kind of like Matt Damon's performance a lot in this, is because I think, he could be just doing the Matt Damon thing, but I think the thing is he has so much nuance. It's just like, it's very layered, and I think he uses that comedy as a mask really well. Like he's snarky, he makes comments and wry remarks and stuff, but like you look deeper and you could see kind of the fear and the pain in his eyes, or the kind of doubt. And especially as the movie goes on, like when his beard is growing out, and like when as you get further and further along and he's getting hungrier and hungrier, I think he shows that like slow development into hunger and like pain and suffering really, really well, because he does start it at a high. He's very excited. He's like, all right, let's science the shit out of this. But I think it's also kind of just real to the moment that like someone as happy-go-lucky as you can be eventually deteriorates with time. And that's what I really like about his performance. And I do think, this movie, like Apollo 13, I think it just had a really good like balance between like the people in space and the people back at home.
Yeah.
And I forget what I said about that movie. I think I liked the stuff back at home more.
Yeah, you
Or
did.
and I kind of wish it had just been that. But here I think he's such an interesting individual, and there's such interesting stuff going on scientifically that I think him kind of trying to learn how to survive on a planet by himself and like have resources and stuff is more interesting to me than like people stuck in a machine trying to get buttons to work. Like for me, that's just more engaging because it's like it's almost its own little kind of survival story on its own. And I do kind of like the marriage of the rescue and the person being rescued in this sense. So I do really like it. I just think this has gone down slightly in my estimations just because a movie like this, when it's all hindering on like, are they going to be rescued? And it's going to be it's going to happen. It does make it a little less enjoyable on rewatch. And we'll talk about it with the Revenant too, where it's like a survival story is really good the first time when you don't know if they're going to survive. But once you do, it really has to be an excellent movie to like really enjoy watching it again and again and again. And I feel like The Martian, it's really fun. It's a great watch, but the stakes are lessened because I know where it's going and where it's going to end up. And I do ultimately know that this is fiction. It's not a true story. So it's kind of also one of those things where that softens the blow as well.
Yeah.
Not to say that a fiction story can't have stakes, but it's one of those things where I think, it's easier knowing it's fictionalized and that he's gonna make it out okay. That makes it a little less like, ugh.
Yeah.
But then again, Interstellar is a very similar one too. Are they gonna come home? Like, what's gonna happen? And I'm all invested in that movie. And I
Yeah.
think that movie also does have some humor, but doesn't let it override it. So, like, it's very interesting that this comes out a year after Interstellar, and I do think that's my favorite Matt Damon space movie if I had to pick. But he is in that. He's not credited. But
Very different character.
very different character. Yes, but yeah, I do think we're kind of in the same boat. I think I still like this a little bit more than you do, maybe, but I do still think like it's just good to see really get his kudos because I do think this is one of his better movies. And also one of his more accessible movies. Like even Alien and Blade Runner, they're kind of dense at times, whereas I think this one, I don't think there's someone who wouldn't enjoy this or wouldn't at least
Oh yeah.
tolerate it. Like I think it's a good crowd pleaser, and I think that's the thing is like of all these movies. Of all 8 of them, even over Mad Max, I think this is the one I'm most confident if I put on for any person from age like 5 to 95, they'd enjoy it. Like even Mad Max, I think there's a specific audience that might not like it. I don't think anyone would dislike this or at least be like, ugh, this is awful. I think they'd be like, that's fun, even if they're not like cinema, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And like, I hope I didn't like sound too negative because like, I actually do really like this movie. I just like,
Yeah, no,
it's just one of those things where it's like, if you put it on like a ladder, this
absolutely.
might be on a sort of a lower rung. But, I do understand why this was nominated because it is a really great crowd pleaser and it's doing a lot of stuff that I think is really interesting. And, it is very like, Apollo 13 and stuff, but I almost like, hearing you talking, just thinking about like what this movie could have been if they would have gone like a different route to make it more interesting. Like, they do all the efforts and then they're flinging around in space and then they don't catch him. And then he pulls a George Clooney and he's just like,
Yeah.
oh shit, Mark Watney, no, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And then they have to like deal with the ramifications of that and just like, what they could have done. Or they try and they just don't make it. They just don't make it to Mars. And, like that could have been like really interesting to not be as crowd pleasing and be that like, dark ending. Or I was thinking, if you noticed me laughing at all during it, it's because I was sitting there thinking like this could have been Castaway, where he has his own Wilson.
Right.
Which apparently Tom Hanks says that is now like the thing that people shout at him most is just looking at him and going, Wilson.
Rover. Yeah, no, that's funny. And one other thing we just brought up Rover and Mars. Like I think also the production designs are really good too. Like I like how they kind of visualize Mars and they make it seem habitable, but like also like it's difficult. Like this is gonna be difficult, and I like all the practical effects too. Like it doesn't feel like a very like digital movie, and that's the one thing I'll give a lot of space movies now, like Gravity, Interstellar, this, Ad Astra. Like they do a really good job just making it feel real, and I really appreciate that. I think space is one of those things that like they've really nailed in the movies in terms of like the visuals of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yes, really, really fun movie. I like it a lot. And
Yeah.
really, feel like this is a movie that is very rewatchable for sure.
Yes. And The Martian, rewatchable in the sense that it gets 7 nominations, but not quite good enough to get a win. It gets 7
Mm.
nominations, 0 wins. It gets nominated for picture, actor for Matt Damon, adapted screenplay, sound editing, sound mixing, production design, and visual effects. So now we're going to talk about the movie where the guy is left for dead and has to try to find his way through survival, eats some pretty gnarly shit. Oh wait, we just talked about that. Oh wait, we have another one, another survival film. We're gonna talk about The Revenant, Chad, the movie that was deemed the pundits' number one predicted winner of Best Picture, but did not win. Though Inarritu got his second Oscar in a row for director, and Leo finally got that coveted Oscar.
Oh yeah.
Chad, tell us
Oh, yeah.
about The Revenant.
The Revenant, directed by Alejandro G. Inarritu, written by Mark L. Smith and Alejandro G. Inarritu, cinematography by Emmanuel Lubezki, music by Ryuichi Sakamoto and Alva Noto, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, Donald Gleason, Will Poulter, Forrest Goodluck, Paul Anderson, Christopher Joner, Dwayne Howard, Mila Nakiko, Arthur Redcloud, and Lucas Haas. Synopsis: a fur trapper's son is killed as he is also left for dead after a vicious bear attacked him, and he vows to recover from his injuries and seek revenge. Based on The Revenant by Michael Punke.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think, where do I begin? I think of all the movies on this list, the one that has grown the least is probably this one for me, just because
Mm.
I loved this film when it came out. Like I said the same about The Martian, but I was like obsessed. I think I saw it twice in theaters. I was like so
Wow.
captivated by it, so enthralled by it, so just invigorated by it. I was like, why is this not winning Best Picture? Inarritu has created 2 masterpieces back to back: Birdman, Revenant. Like Leo's getting his Oscar, fantastic, fantastic. Actually, thinking about it, like I do think the one film I would put in number one is probably still number one back then. But I was like all for this winning, and I remember being so pissed off when Spotlight beat this. But now watching it, I don't know if I feel the same way, and I'm
Mm.
like kind of shocked by it because I remember just loving this so much, and watching this again, like I don't know. I want to hear what your thoughts are because I don't want to yuck anyone's yum here, but I'm curious what you think about it because you went, oh yeah, with Leo's performance. So I know we could probably agree there, but I
Oh,
would
yeah.
just love to hear what you think of this because I'm conflicted and I need to figure out what I want to say about it before I say it.
Yeah, I think I was kind of like more middle. I think a little bit of the reverse. I was more middle on the road on it back when I first saw it, and then this time I think I liked it a lot more
Oh, okay.
than I
Oh,
did.
fun.
Um,
This is fun. This is fun. Okay, cool.
yeah, and I think the reason is because you know me, I'm very off put by like animal cruelty and things like that.
Yeah.
And this is a very brutal movie with animals, with people, with just just the world that they live in. But it's also one of those where like I can't like really like. It's hard to be so off put by something, but also like sit there and like look at the movie and go, that stuff was happening back then, and so to
Yeah.
like make it like truly authentic and realistic, like it's hard not to include darker darker things and things that are kind of hard to watch. And also to portray just what this man, Leo's character, like has gone through. And he's not a bad guy. Like he's just a really good guy. He's just, trying to do his job and make it and live with his son. He lost his wife, and then, his son is killed. And just for being brown, I guess, just not being like everyone else. And you see like this, big, even then kind of like cultural like hatred of different people who are different. And he has to not only be attacked by a bear, but then be left for dead. His son's murdered, and to see like the pain that he has from the loss of his wife and his son, to have like this like one track mind of like this thing that he's got to do, and he goes through this like epic journey to get there, to find Tom Hardy and seek his revenge. And I love how you look up what the Revenant is. A Revenant's like a creature, like a mystical like creature who is set on vengeance and revenge. And I love how Leo's character is kind of compared to that, and you get to see just the gritty, and harsh way that he's able to get through all of this stuff, survive, heal up, and then even when he finally gets back to the society, you see like the condition like his lips are in, and I'm like, ew. But like it's so kind of like seems like so realistic that you're just like really in it, and it's really visceral, you wanting to see him get that revenge. And just this is, apart from Mad Max Fury Road, this is like easily the most beautiful looking movie. Like I could totally see why this won cinematography, because it's just like, it's kind of like reminiscent of like the Tree of Life, where I'm just like, look at this fucking movie. Holy shit. It looks so good.
Well, same cinematographer. So there
you go.
Yeah.
See? So it totally makes sense. And then, just that mixed with like Leo's performance, and mixed with, just like, I don't know, just like, watching like all the depth too. Like they don't gloss over his pain, and like when the time when he like sees like the vision of his wife, and stuff like that, and just like it's really sad, and you can kind of really just feel that. So I totally see why Leo was able to win, because I know people kind of would be like, oh, we had to like cut into a horse and hide in a horse to win this award, but like he does so much more than that. And I just feel like, this was really well earned by him.
Yeah, we definitely agree on the visuals and on Leo. Like Leo, I don't think this is in my top 5 Leo performances just because he's such a good actor. But I do understand why he won it. Because like if you look at the field, like Bryan Cranston for Trumbo, I mean, it's his first nomination. So like that's awesome that he's just there. Matt Damon for The Martian, we talked about it. A great performance, but like I don't think it's like an Oscar-worthy one. Eddie Redmayne, The Danish Girl, he just won the year before. I think this was just like Eddie Redmayne's still hot. Let's nominate him for that problematic movie. And then like Michael Fassbender, that's who I would have gone for, because I think his performance in Steve Jobs is like otherworldly. But again, like he's still relatively not new to the scene, but he's still got time. Whereas Leo, it's like if you have a performance that's this good amongst 5 actors who are all well respected, but like there's not a clear standout amongst the other 4, like unless you're going to give it to Fassbender, but Steve Jobs wasn't nominated for much anyway. Like it made sense. The most nominated movie of the night, the movie that was supposed to win, it was Leo's time. And I hate that whole idea of like it's his time, but it really was. And I think it's still a good enough performance where it's okay. Like if we look back at Leo's legacy, I'm not going to look at this as his best performance, but it's going to be one that I'm like, okay, he won for that one, sure. Because it is probably his most committed performance. It's his most like full bodied. It's his most like intense. Like he's putting himself through the ringer. Do you think does that mean every actor has to put themselves through the ringer to get an award? No, that should not set a precedent. But like eating a raw liver of an animal, like, and actually throwing up on the set, it's disgusting. But like, it's commitment, and I appreciate that. And I think just to commit to honor him for his commitment as an actor, I'm definitely down for it. As for the direction, like I said, George Miller, there's no better directed movie of the last 40 years. So I disagree with that. Inarritu beating George Miller there. But cinematography, I agree. Like I think it's really well done. The only thing is sometimes I'm like, for such a gritty movie, for such a movie that is like so dense, I honestly wish it was a little less like blissful in its presentation. The lighting is really good in how like dark and dismal it is. But sometimes it's almost a little too flowy and too glowy, too gliding of a pace. With the camera, I would have liked a little bit more cutting, honestly, because it is such a gritty film. Like maybe a few more close-ups. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes it's a little too like, like beautiful, where it can be a little bit more intense and a little darker. But I think just the actual craft of like just getting all those shots and like all those large pans and stuff, and it's beautiful. The tracking shots are great. Just the way the nature is captured is fantastic and phenomenal. I think for me, it's just like kind of similar with the Martian. I'm like, there's no suspense for me of like what's gonna happen. I think the added benefit here is that there's a revenge story to be had. It's not just survival.
Yeah.
Whereas Martian, it's also a rescue story, not just survival. But for this one, it's survival and then revenge. But also at the same time, the Martian, you have all those people back home to comment on, to have like that wide perspective. Whereas here, you really only have DiCaprio and at times Tom Hardy. And Tom Hardy as a villain is so good, but also so one note in a way. He's just kind of there to serve a purpose as a villain. Whereas I think it's really just the Leo show, to where like those hours where he's like just kind of trudging through the wilderness, eating stuff and shivering and grunting and like that kind of stuff, for
Mm.
me doesn't play as well on rewatch. And I wonder if, and this could just be where we are now, and I'm gonna have to see if this holds true for the next few months, if watching on this littler screen here or even like a screen like this does impact, because I really do think watching this in a theater, it was also a very cold time of year when this came out. This came out in like the winter, December,
Mhm.
January. Like I remember seeing this and The Hateful Eight and like shivering in my seat watching those movies because like it was so cold outside. And I loved those movies at the time because of that. And I'm wondering if maybe The Revenant, had I seen this again in a theater, totally undistracted, uninterrupted, and just like enjoyed watching it. Because also I'm in the Caribbean, so it's like hard to like feel that sense of like cold anguish. I wonder if the theatrical experience really elevated this for me. But then again, I watched Mad Max Fury Road. I had to watch it on my phone, and I thought it was exhilarating. So it's like one of those things where I'm like,
Mm.
a movie should be able to hold up in any medium, but I think this being on a cruise is going to be a real test to like, do these big epics really truly feel epic if you take away the epic scale? Mad
Yeah.
Max Fury Road does. I don't know if The Revenant does. And I
And
just worry that like maybe I needed to see this again in a theater, or maybe just like see it in a colder environment, or maybe just been in a better headspace, because it's also one of those movies that you can't just throw on. I think you
yeah.
have to be 100% committed to like
Mhm.
going through this journey with this character. I also don't know if the bear effects hold up as well. Like I was always kind of like, that's a fake bear. But again, no bear, you can get a real bear. But I do think it's at least an interesting journey. And there's just something about it, like the whole like Oscar's so white of it all, and it's like Leo of all people, the white guy is gonna come up and be like, "This is a movie about taking back what was stolen from the Native Americans." I'm like, I get the
Mhm.
sentiment, it's great, but it's also like you're not acknowledging a Native American actor or an Indigenous actor. It's not
Yeah.
like Lily Gladstone getting her due for Killers
Yeah.
of the Flower Moon, getting that nomination. I do think the Native American characters are kind of underutilized here. Like, obviously, there's a motive and there's a purpose, like his son and his wife and stuff. But even then, like, I think their characters are kind of one note and flat. And I really don't think the relationship is as nuanced and as rich, between a father and son, because we're about to talk about a movie where a parent and child relationship is so strong. It's like hard to
Yeah.
like I never really felt that emotional investment here.
Mm.
To where it's
Okay.
really just, honestly, what I'm most invested in is Leo himself as an actor going through this as an actor and pushing himself and like he's never pushed himself before. That's kind of what I take from this time, more so than like this character getting revenge on something that has wronged him, on this relationship that means so much to him. So that's where I'm at with The Revenant. I think it could just be a matter of where I saw it and how I saw it this
Yeah.
time. But I remember really loving this. So obviously at the time, like it makes sense why this was a favorite to win. Also, I mean, to do this right after winning Best Picture for Birdman, it's impressive, to kind of follow it
Very.
up with also something that's so different. Like could not be
Yeah.
any more tonally different than Birdman. So good on them. But I just worry that like this one of all the movies just kind of fell flatter to me, and I don't know why. I'm kind of bummed
Yeah.
by it, honestly, because I really like. I like a lot about it. It's just like for some reason it just doesn't give me the same feels as I once had for it.
Yeah. It's kind of kind of cool to see like our trajectories of
Yeah.
the movie kind of be opposite a little
Yeah.
bit. It's kind of funny because it almost felt like you were saying like come on man, Leo did everything. At least fight a real bear, Leo. Not a fake bear.
Yeah, or fight the cocaine bear. That would be fun.
Oh man,
Um,
that was actually a terrifying bear in that movie.
yeah, like that
And
bear was pretty good. Again, like that's just the visual effects of the time. I mean, I think that's why Ex Machina's win is so cool, because like now it'll always hold up. Ex
yeah,
Machina's visual effects will never look bad. Neither will Mad Max Fury Roads, but I think like the Revenant's like
Yeah.
maybe now I wouldn't nominate it for visual effects. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Cool.
Is that it? Like I know we each kind of
Yes,
said our
I
piece,
mean,
but
I think it's I liked it a lot more, but it is one of those things where I agree that like on rewatch, it's just the brutality of it is so hard to watch a lot of the
yeah,
time that for me it's just it's a wonder that I actually did like this movie. It's a testament to it that I like this movie more despite all the brutality of it, because that stuff is just so hard to watch that
yeah.
I'm not going to throw this on. I'll throw The Martian on probably more than this, even though I think this is a better movie than The Martian.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um,
That's fair. Yeah. Well, there you go. The Academy, though, loved this movie, nominated it up the wazoo. 12 nominations, the most of the day. Not the most wins. Mad Max had the most wins, but this had the most nominations. 12 nominations. It won 3. It won director for Alejandro Iñárritu. It won actor for Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, and it won cinematography, but it also was nominated for picture, supporting actor for Tom Hardy, sound editing, sound mixing, production design, makeup and hair, costumes, film editing, and visual effects. So a lot of people representing the Revenant in that room that day. But who else was in the room that day was the production team behind the movie Room, which was the little indie that could really, a movie that not many people knew about until like the summer was nearly ending and people were like, oh, this little indie movie's coming out. And then it came out and it captured so many hearts, and it was based on a book that Chad and I have both read. So
yeah.
very excited to talk about Room, Chad. Tell us about Room.
Room, directed by Lenny Abrahamson, written by Emma Donahue, cinematography by Danny Cohen, music by Stephen Rennicks, starring Brie Larson, Jacob Tremblay, Joan Allen, William H. Macy, Sean Bridgers, Ram McCamus, Cass Anvar, Amanda Brugel, Wendy Crewson, and Joe Ping. Uh, Synopsis: a kidnapped and abused woman mothers a child in a shed, and they both must learn how to adapt to normal life after they escape confinement. Based on Room by Emma Donahue.
Yeah. So, Chad, did you read the book before you saw the movie, or did
No.
you see the movie? Okay. Because I was gonna say, I the moment where you realize that this movie has a whole second half of them
Mhm.
in life, because they only advertised it for the room, like what the room was gonna be. I didn't even know what the room was. So the first time I watched this
Mm.
back in 2015, I was like already like, oh shit, like she's a kidnapped rape victim. Oh my god,
Yeah.
this is her son. When that movie takes the turn and he escapes, and like they're planning to escape, but when he's actually like in the truck and you know where it's going, and then he escapes, there is no bigger thrill than that moment. Like I fully think that is the most thrilling scene. Like yes, Mad Max Fury Road is like incredible, has so many thrilling scenes, but it's all kind of just one big thrilling car chase. Like I couldn't pick out
Yeah.
one specific scene of that. Star Wars has a lot of them too. So Sicario has some great moments. Straight Outta Compton, whatever. This movie though, this moment is like my favorite movie moment of the year of 2015. Just that one scene where he escapes and the music is swelling and he's looking up at the sky. It I was so afraid to rewatch this movie because I was terrified that I would not cry as much, that I would be like, it's great, but like the first time you watch it, it's so cathartic and powerful. Because I just watched The Martian and The Revenant, where I was like, damn, like it's not as good when you know the mystery, when you
Mm.
know they're both gonna survive, or they're both gonna like get the revenge or get home or whatever. But this one I was like dreading. I was like, I have not seen this movie since 2015 because it just struck me so emotionally. I couldn't go back to it. I really hope it works. And it worked even better. And it just made me cry all that much more. But that escape sequence is just like just some of the best cinema I've ever seen. Like really, like I was just crying my eyes out at that moment. And it just really is a movie that just after that keeps going. And it's kind of like the Star is Born thing where like everyone says the movie's great up till Shallow, and then after Shallow it's just like a miserable mess, and it's sad, and it just like it's hard to watch, and I like the first half so much more, the magical first hour, whereas this one I'm like, no, like the first hour is kind of the sad hour, and then the second hour though is where you kind of get, it's still sad obviously, but it's kind of that glimmer of hope. It's kind of like that like freedom and catharsis, but it is still sad because it is kind of unfortunate that so much was deprived, and you have so many great conversations with like the parents and just this kid adjusting to life, and her feeling betrayed, the guy William H. Macy not being able to even look at the kid, like just so many fascinating things in this movie. I could go on and on, but I want to let you speak because I could go on and on. But Chad, what do you think of Room?
I love Room. I love it more now than I did when I first saw it,
Hmm.
and it's such a sea change for me.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, looking at like this, looking at another movie that we've already covered, like Juno, and just how I was emotionally invested with them before, but then after having a son and watching these movies, I can't with them. It's like I watch them and I end up like crying more than I've ever cried before. Um and with this one, it's so hard to even just think about this. It's also another like fictitious story, but this kind of shit happens, unlike
Hmm.
people going to Mars yet.
Hmm.
That doesn't really happen, but like here you could totally see something like this happening. And the idea of what this little boy was like raised into, and how this little room is everything that he knows, until he can expand his mind. And just like the idea of that, like what he calls things in the room, and um how he in his mind understands what television is. And then like she kind of like builds this world for him so that he can exist in this little room, and like actually be a person in this room, until she actually has to start like telling him, like breaking that bubble, and that saying, the world is so much bigger and you deserve so much. I'm gonna start crying right now thinking
I
about it.
know.
Like, you deserve so much more than just this little room that this evil person has like put us here. And like she starts to say, like, I want so much more for you. And then also her like having to deal with her own issues of being a victim, and like
Right. And having
and
to
then
be strong for him while also trying to deal with your
yes,
own, like, you can't crack because you have to be there for your kid. Yeah.
yes, I've
Totally.
had moments like that before, where I've cried, and then Elliot seeing me cry and just like thinking about that, like, what is this going to do to him? Like, kind of a deal. And so I totally understand that. But then like seeing like, her having to explain this to him, and then knowing that he's a child of such a sad and evil, predicament that someone put her in and put him in. And then knowing he's like a child of rape, and a but even though he's like born out of this like very dark place, he's such a beautiful little kid that she loves so much. And to see him go into the world and then have to be, as a little kid, like accepted by people, and to see people like her father just
Yeah.
like, knowing that, like, what happened to his daughter, he can't like cope with it. And then see him kind of just like exit the movie because he can't be there emotionally for her, can't be there to even like look at the kid, to not even acknowledge him as a human being, and just a little kid who did nothing to deserve any of this. And like knowing all of that, and just seeing like the performance that Jacob Tremblay gives, that Brie Larson gives, it's just like so, yeah, emotional. And like seeing like all the after effects of you know him not even wanting to play with all the toys, and
Mhm.
wanting to go back and see Room, but then as soon as he goes back and sees Room, it's like so much smaller than he remembered.
Right.
It's
That
much,
scene destroys me because also just him asking to see it, you as a parent, like, I mean, me as I'm not even a parent, but I was like, oh
yeah,
my gosh, like, what do you do as a parent in that moment? Like, obviously you don't want to say no to your kid, but also like, but I love how she does show him because she
yeah,
does understand, like, this is going to show him how much worse he had it. And I think it's admirable because most parents would be like, no, we're never going back there. But it's like, to show him and let him see it and make that realization for himself. It's another thing of like trust of your kid and parent. It's like, he has to trust her. Obviously, it's his mother, but like she has to trust him too. She literally, the escape hinges on him. Like she has to put all her trust in this kid, and it really is beautiful to see because a lot of the times as parents, like, and you could probably test this in some cases, but it's like, no, you are the protector. You're the one who is protecting them, and like they are just this like thing to be taken care of and not manipulated, but like I control what my kid does. I drive them there, I drive them here, but her putting all her faith into him in that one moment of the escape, but then also like letting him have his wish of like going back to the room and make that realization for himself and kind of have thoughts for himself. That's something that's just so cool to see from a parenting angle, is like letting your kid have a sense of independence, because truthfully he's grown up faster than any other kid ever has, but at the same time slower than any kid ever has, because he's had to kind of become the man of the house, but also the man of a house that is not a house at all. And it's this really interesting character study, and I think Jacob Tremblay, to be his age and to get this
Yeah.
down to such an incredible science of like having to be naive but also still been through so much at the same time, is just such an interesting balance that I'll never be able to understand how he captures so well, but I
Yeah.
really do love those moments where she does kind of see him as an equal, and like, we're going through this together. It's not just me taking care of you, we take care of each other, and like I need you for this, I need you for that, and that's really bold to see, because as parents you need your kids as much as they need you. Like it is a very harmonious relationship. It's not just one-sided, and I'm sure you can attest to that. Like you need Elliot as much as he needs you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And just to know how they're able to like capture just all of this in like this movie, and just, me like putting like my personal stuff into it, and just how the movie's changed for me so much. And that, it used to be like, it was a good movie, but like now it's just like, holy shit, like I can't, this movie is just so, meaningful. Like, when you just even like thinking about you talking about like the escape scene, and when he's in the truck and stuff and wriggling out of the carpet. But the idea like this, even before that, with Brie Larson teaching him like, okay, this is what you're gonna do, this is what you're gonna do, and wondering if this plan's even gonna work. Because the yeah, just wondering if the plan's gonna work. And then like for me, I was just in the thinking about like, I'm in this situation. I could be doing this so that my son can make it out and live, but I don't know if I'll ever see my son again.
True,
But
because she doesn't know if she'll ever get out. Yeah.
that's more important than keeping him close so that he only can witness this one room,
Mhm.
probably for the rest of his life, I guess. Or I don't know what the hell would happen if they just stay there.
Right.
So him getting out is so important, and then not even knowing if that means that she gets to escape too, or what. And you get that kind of panic when he escapes, and then he doesn't really know how to tell them where this is or what's going on, but like they get enough information to actually find her, and stuff. But yeah, just like that, even that moment of, this is the moment of no return, as soon as he got him in that carpet and takes him
Yeah.
away,
Yeah. And even like if he doesn't even get to the authorities at all, and like this guy sees the kid alive, I think that's why every moment of that escape is so perfect. Because like you have the moment where he's out and he's looking at the sky and you're like, yes. But then you have the moment where like the guy sees him and like is chasing after him and you're like, shit, he's just gonna take him back. But then you get the moment where he does get to the authorities. But then you get the moment where he doesn't remember his mom's name or whatever. But then you get the moment where, like every single it like takes a bunch of little twists and turns, but it doesn't feel like an audience emotional manipulation either. It just feels like
Oh,
genuine and raw to the experience of like, this kid doesn't, there's so much sensory overload in this moment. And something about the sensory experience that I love is the adaptation of this script, because in the book it's like when Jack is like talking about room, it's almost like a fantasy world, it's almost like a
yeah,
full imagined space. And what I like about this film is that we still hear that, like he still talks as if it's this fantasy world, but we as the viewers are seeing it for what it is, which is this just total dark,
yeah,
dismal little space. And I really like that because it's showing the dichotomy, and it makes it sadder because you're hearing this kid talk and talk and talk, and you see what's around him, and you're like, this kid doesn't even know.
yeah,
But I still like how they still film it in a way that like when it's from his perspective, the ceilings do look higher, the room does look more vast, but when it's from her perspective it looks tighter. And I just think, I pulled up his name because he's super underrated in this sense. Danny Cohen, the cinematographer, is the MVP. I don't want to say the MVP because there's so many MVPs of this movie, but I think he's one of the MVPs of this movie because he has to be able to create not just a child's perspective, not just a adult's perspective, but also keep it exciting for the audience to want to keep watching and not feel like bored by the surroundings because you only have one location for a whole half a movie. But then once you get out into the real world, having to make these spaces feel full and wide and big and expansive, but also overwhelmingly so, to where Jacob Tremblay's character can enjoy it, but also enjoyably so to where Brie Larson's character can revel in it. Like, I think there's just so much to the cinematography that, like, yes, you have these big spectacles, The Revenant, Mad Max, Star Wars, Sicario, Hateful Eight, great movies, Carol, but like this movie not being in the cinematography 5 is such a shame, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's such a shame because I think the cinematography, yes, the shots themselves may not be pretty, but the use of camera work in this film is genius. And I think
Yeah.
Lenny Abrahamson getting an award nomination for this, despite being a pretty relatively no-name director, brilliant. Brie Larson kind of being a no-name actress at this time. She was in Short Term 12 and 21 Jump Street, but she wasn't like a big, phenomenal, like famous actress. She didn't done
Yeah.
Captain Marvel yet. Getting a win for this, brilliant. You know, Jacob Tremblay being this young undiscovered talent, like getting a Critics' Choice nomination and win for a young actor, brilliant. Like, I really think the fact that this movie got the accolades it got are amazing, and it could have gotten more, honestly. And Danny Cohen, we're not big fans of Danny Cohen here because he also was a cinematographer for Les Mis. So the fact that he also did this, I think this kind of claustrophobic feel works really well for this. Didn't work really well for Les Mis, but works really well for this movie. And I just really
Mhm.
think it's a shame he didn't get nominated for cinematography. And honestly, Stephen Rennick's for the music too. Like, I think the music is fantastic in here too. A lot of people have said it's like a little overwhelming, a little too like emotional, manipulated, but like, I don't care. I want to cry. Like, this movie makes me want to just like let it all out because it also makes me think of like someday when I am a parent, I'm gonna also have that bond. I hope to have that bond with my
It's
kid.
gonna hit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, everyone strives to have a bond like these two have. It sucks that they have to go through what they go through, but even the moment in the talk show where she's like, "Why would you bring a child into this world? Like, why would you do this? Why would you do that?" I'm like, God, if I was a parent, I wouldn't know. Like, I mean, there's a million things going on. She's a young kid, you know, like it really is crazy just how powerful that bond is in this film and
Yeah.
how just crazy the world around operates when something like this happens, and all you can think about is just like the well-being of your kid. And I don't know, I could go on and on. This movie is
I could too.
phenomenal. Yeah,
I
this
both
movie is
can and can't because, trying to do it will just make me cry on
right,
camera, and I
right.
don't really want to do that. So,
Yeah. Well, the next movie is a light one. No, wait, sorry, no, it's about
oh yeah,
kids being tortured too. So yeah, God, this is a very dismal way to end this show, but maybe we'll end on a high after. But phenomenal. Room nominated
yeah.
for 4 awards, only wins one. Brie Larson, but it's well deserved. It's nominated for picture, director Lenny Abrahamson, and adapted screenplay. I think nowadays would probably get even more, but I think just the way it trickled out, the indie distribution of it all, it's lucky to have even made the 8, let alone the 10, just because it is one of those movies that just like you don't really see get nominated, but it just speaks to the quality of it. You know, it is just
Yeah.
that good. But as I alluded to earlier, there's another movie about kids that's very sad. Not really from the kids' perspective.
Yeah.
We kind of see them as grown-ups, but dealing with child abuse, which is very sad. But it is the movie that won. It is the movie that upset all the others. Upset the Revenant in particular, but it was a big shock on the day when Morgan Freeman said Spotlight. So let's talk, Chad, about Spotlight.
Yep. Spotlight, directed by Tom McCarthy, written by Josh Singer and Tom McCarthy. Cinematography by Masanobu Takayanagi. Music by Howard Shore. Starring Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Brian D'Arcy, James. Does it? Oh,
Ryan
Brian
Darcy James.
D'Arcy James. I was like, does that just say James? Liev Schreiber, John Slattery, Stanley Tucci, James Sheridan, Billy Crudup, and Richard Jenkins. Synopsis. A story breaks about the level of egregious sexual abuse within the Catholic Church by a small investigating reporting team.
Yes. Spotlight, as you might want to say with the Boston accent. Spotlight. So here's the thing. This movie, we have both swam in circles where, we've been in this film discourse for long enough where we know when this movie comes up, it's usually met with either a should not have beat Mad Max Fury Road or the controversial it deserved to win over Mad Max Fury Road. It always tends to be that debate, which is very interesting. Even
Yeah.
though Mad Max, I'll say right now, was not like a contender to win Best Picture necessarily by the
Right.
pundits. If anything, it was The Revenant. So It'll be interesting to talk about this in context with The Revenant, but considering Mad Max is kind of the big, like, notable film from this year that most people like to talk about, this always becomes a conversation of, like, did it deserve to win? Did it not deserve to win? So it's going to be cool to, like, kind of just talk about the movie first, just as it is, and then we can get into, like, the upset of it all. But I know Chad and I have both kind of swam in the same circle of, like, it's good, but, like, did it deserve to win? And I think you especially have been even more skeptical of it, or at least have gotten into more tiffs with people about it, just because I know there are a lot of people who are big Spotlight champions.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, yeah, I get it. I like it. It's a deserving win. It's okay. Let's all be friends. Whereas I'm just sitting in my own little corner being like, I think this should have won, which is a totally different movie than any of those. I'm very curious to hear what you think, because I know this is one that we have both been like, oh boy, Spotlight, this is going to be a big contentious one. But what do you think of Spotlight, Chad?
I mean, it's weird. It's like, because like Spotlight is a really good movie. It's not like it's weird when you have to frame things around like Oscar stuff, and it's like when people like just like can't stand Shakespeare in Love because it beat Saving Private Ryan, and it's like when you watch Shakespeare in Love, it's a good movie. It's just a good movie.
Yeah, it was our best movie. We picked it. So
right, and then when you watch Spotlight, it's a good movie. So it's just one of those where, like, even though I may or may not think that this is the best of this whole slate, this slate is just really good, and so this is just another addition of a really good movie to that. I mean, if you look at like reporting, like what do you call it, journalism movies, I think this is like of like the upper echelon. I do think just the subject matter, the story that they have, showing how difficult it is to take a story like this that's so kind of like monumental, where you tell people about it and you're like, no, you don't understand just how it's kind of like The Big Short, where it's like you don't understand how monumental this story actually is. It's not just like one or two priests, which is bad enough. One or two priests, in like a district in Boston or something like that. This is like a entire Catholic Church kind of thing that we're dealing with. Like how many incidences does this match up to? And then not only just that, but like the story of this small team, Spotlight choosing to focus on this, and then you got the Liev Schreiber, a very different character from Cotton Weary and Scream, to come into this, coming in and not being Catholic, and trying to say like, let's focus on the story. People pushing back and saying, how powerful this church is, right? You know what this is going to do. You know what you're up against. It's like a David versus Goliath type of situation right here. And yet they're like, this is the truth. And, you have characters who care so much. Like, I think my favorite character in this is probably Mark Ruffalo. Just like how much he cares, how passionate he is. And he's like, I'm going to go right now and, figure out, like, find stuff about this story and stuff. And, Rachel McAdams as well, Michael Keaton. I just think, like, yeah, it is such a good cast to give us this story and how sensitive it is and how it's portrayed, like, with such respect and, to the victims and everything. And I think it is a really good movie, really eye-opening kind of story. Of course, now, people kind of, make shots at the Catholic Church and kind of joke about it, even though it's such a stark thing. People will say like, oh, priest, kind of a deal. And, but back then it was like such a revelatory kind of thing. And to see a movie capture that and how like nuanced that was, I think is really good. So yeah, on one hand, I get it, because this does feel like a movie that could and should win Best Picture, but there may or may not be other movies that I like more than this, though this is a really good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly think when looking at like the Revenant and Spotlight, that specific matchup, like personally, I think the Revenant is just a better crafted film, obviously, in terms of its visuals and stuff. But Spotlight just like makes me feel more. I feel like it's a more rich emotional experience. I'm getting more from Spotlight than I am the Revenant from a storytelling perspective. Like I really do like Spotlight, and I do think it has really great. Um, Use of just the process and work and just kind of seeing just like how you can tell a story but through a different lens. It's kind of interesting because you could just tell a story about child abuse directly from the church. I mean, the movie Doubt deals directly with that. Like you're seeing it from the inner lens of the church itself. You know, you could have it from these kids perspectives as they grow up. But what I like about this movie, movies like She Said, you know, this idea that like the journalists are kind of the ones tapping into a bunch of different people's stories as like this kind of connective tissue. So you're not just getting one single perspective on the matter. You're getting a bunch of different perspectives from a bunch of different people. And what I like about it is that the actual team, and this kind of was talking about The Big Short, like I feel like the team here in Spotlight, like each of the actual members of this newspaper crew feels like they're emotionally invested in it too, and they're also emotionally changed by it too. Like I love Rachel McAdams' character and how like her mom is, you know, very Catholic and how that kind of affects her relationship. You know, and Michael Keaton being the guy who has that burden of having not spoken up about it when he could have, or kind of neglected it and didn't publish a story when it was originally presented to him. And, you know, Leaf Schreiber being this newer guy on the case. Like, I think everyone has a different kind of thought and opinion on the matter. They're all kind of connected to the same goal, but they each have their own different like experiences and personalities that like connect them differently to the material that is not just factually based, which
Yeah,
is like what The Big Short is. It's like this is what I did in this crisis in this story to help the plot go along. Here it's more so this is what I'm doing for my business, for my newspaper, but this is also how I feel about it and this is also how I'm connecting to it. um you know, I really think that's the power of this movie is that it does feel like it's not just there to get out the facts, but to get to the heart of it all too.
yeah,
Because it is tough subject matter. I think a movie like this, you use the kind of journalism mask as a way to kind of alleviate the denseness and how tough the actual subject matter is. Because like, okay, you could always go back to the reporting and make it about the work and about the paper, and not necessarily have to make it all about the trauma. Whereas I think there's like a documentary to be made about this where they just investigate the trauma. Where like reading the article itself is probably going to be too much, but the seeing behind the scenes of the making of that article is what makes it so fascinating because
yeah,
you're also getting the business side of things too. When to publish it, how to get all the names, how to make it the most credible source, how to, you know, all the things you don't think about when you just read something online. You're like, how much went into this production of it?
yeah,
And that's the same with movies about making movies too. It's like so fun to see the behind the scenes of how things come to be on top of all the other things you see on the surface. You know, like what are the inner machinations of everyone's minds going a mile a minute, working together tirelessly throughout the night. I'm really excited to watch The Post because like I think it's going to be another fun one to kind of look at this kind of inner world of journalism, in a
yeah,
way that also All the President's Men was. You know, like I really
yeah.
do like journalism films, Network, you know, like so many great films.
Same.
Is this one of the very, very best of the best? I do still think time will tell. I think right
Yeah,
now it's kind of being a bit reappraised because people are like, no, it's really good, but I still think people are just so like obsessed with Mad Max and even like, you know, with Adam McKay kind of going on his run, people love The Big Short, and you know, I think with time we'll kind of tell. I think movies like The Revenant and movies like even like though we love them like Brooklyn and Room aren't as talked about nowadays. So hopefully
yeah,
the spotlight is staying in the zeitgeist. But it is just very interesting that this kind of became like a villain in a sense because it won against some other films, but
mm,
also people who don't like The Revenant, this was kind of the hero because it was like, oh, The Revenant's so
yeah,
drab and so dull, like this big Western. Leo's just doing too much. Oh, Spotlight won, cool. So it's really interesting to see how
yeah,
many people were like so excited about it, how many people were so like taken aback by it, like how could they? You know, I was kind of just a mix of both. I was like, whoa, The Revenant lost, like did not see that coming, but also like I like Spotlight, but I'm also like the two best movies didn't win. They weren't even in the conversation, which we'll get to when we get
mm,
to our ranking. But very interesting. I like how you brought up the performances because I think above all else, this is a showcase of kind of like writing and acting, and I like how they did award two nominations for Mark Ruffalo and Rachel McAdams. But I even like it's hard to find like one single standout. I think because Rachel
Yeah.
McAdams is the only girl of the group, it's like easy to see her, rise above because she also just like is also one of my favorite actresses. But like Ruffalo's great.
Same.
I think Keaton's great. I honestly might even like this more than Birdman Keaton. I really like him in this.
Mhm.
I really, really like Liev Schreiber in this too.
Yeah.
Brian Darcy James, who's like a stage legend, was really great in this as well. I haven't seen him in a lot of film. So yeah, like just such a stacked cast, all in all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, just thinking about like the storytelling like mechanism that this is, like this could have been a different kind of movie. Like you want to tell a story about this, it could have had a story about like a Catholic church and altar boys and priests and stuff like that, and a very harrowing like dark movie about that, about abuse and stuff. But they decide to tell it through the journalism method, and I think that is a really cool device because we do get like scenes where you see people portraying those victims as adults, like you said, where they're telling the story, and like the one guy, like she meets him at the diner and they're sitting there talking, and he's like, I'm very, some people don't even want to talk because so they don't even want to relive those memories, or they're mistrustful of what people will do with the information, or kind of a deal, or they just don't even want to go against the Catholic Church, just all this type of stuff. But then when she finally meets like one person who's willing to tell his story, and like he's telling some of it, and then like she wants to know more, and then he's like, we better get this to go. Like we got to go to a private space and like actually talk about what happened, because it's so, it's more than you think. And then you also get kind of like kind of relevant to today, in my opinion. She shows up at the door and talks to the former priest guy, who bluntly just comes out and like says what he did, but like kind of like justifies it in a way, but he also seems kind of like senile in a little bit of a way at this point, and like kind of just comes out and says like in a very like yeah, I used to do this to whatever. And it almost seems like today, where people are taking very horrible things and justifying them and trying to make them seem like it's like normalizing it, certain things of today that are very horrible, and normalizing it in a way. So it feels like kind of that in the movie. So you do get those moments in this movie where like, holy shit. So
yeah,
I do think it's a very good movie, even though there have been times where it seems like I've been more negative on it, but it's normally when I'm like in like a debate mode against someone who's like, Spotlight's deserve to win. It's easily the best movie at the slate. I'm like, not so fast. Like this is a really great slate to where I can see a lot of these different movies winning Best Picture. Yet, my favorite may or may not be the one that other people like, or may be the same one that a lot of other people like. I don't know.
Well, I'm very interested to see what wins our ranking, because now I'm like, now I'm wondering, because I know what my number one is. I thought I knew what your number one was. We'll see if it changes.
I think we might need a coin flip this time. Is what I'm thinking.
Interesting.
We'll
Okay, I'm feeling that too. But what I will say, a positive and a negative for this film. One last one. Negative only because I used to think this was a positive, but it does make it a little, not emotional manipulation wise, but like it's a little too much, which is like when you like get the shot of like them walking, and then there's the church, and then it like cuts to the playground right next to the church. It's harrowing. And I honestly think that's a really good device. And that's just like real life. I mean, just the fact, like the pit in your stomach when you see a playground next to a church, and like what that means. And what I like about it is that Tom McCarthy just shows it and doesn't have to say anything about it, but then there are moments where it like really draws your attention, like when she's standing outside the door and she sees like the kids go by on like the scooters or whatever, and they're playing in the street, and she almost kind of goes like, oh no, like I'm like, that's a little too much, where I'm like, okay, like we get it. Like honestly, it's harrowing still, yes, but it's like, yeah, like the whole idea is that like there's kids everywhere and there's priests everywhere, and that's kind of the scary thing. It's like, yes, you go swimming in the ocean, you're this far out in the ocean, the sharks are all over here, so you're never going to really get a shark attack. But if you put the sharks in a pool, they're right there with you. That
You
kind of
live right
idea.
next to them. Yeah.
Yeah, like the odds of a shark attack are very, very slim because the sharks, there's so much water and you're only on a small little surface of it. But yeah, anyway, bad metaphor. But I do think it- some of those moments are very tastefully done, and definitely deliver the punch. It's when they like draw the attention to it, like specifically the one where the kids are going down the street and you see like Rachel McAdams react to it, and it's like, okay, like it's a little okay. I get what you're going for here. You're really trying for the feels, which like I'm still angry about it. Like I'm still like seeing this and I'm like, oh, like the fact that like those kids are playing on the street, they have no idea
Yeah.
that a pedophile perv is living inside that house. Like it makes me angry, but it's one of those things where it's very clearly like there as a device to get an emotional reaction out of the audience that sometimes is a little bit more nuanced than others. What I really like though is I like the ending. I like how the whole movie is like kind of building, and every time there's like a number, they're like, whoa, that many. And you don't even know how much it's going to
Yeah.
grow. And it's sad. It's sad. But like at the end, when like they publish the article and then they're just all getting calls and calls and they're running and they're like, wait, what? There's like, they had to send more people to the spotlight department. Like it's overflowing, yada, yada, yada. And it's, for journalism, it's exciting because it's like, oh my gosh, like we're being useful. Like all the phones are ringing. This is exciting. But then you think about it in your head and you're like, wait, no, this isn't exciting. This is just people coming forward. It's great that they're sharing their stories so we can like out these people. It's
Yeah.
admirable for people to come forward, but at the same time, it's like that sucks that this many people that like it's almost
affected.
tragic.
Yeah.
It's almost like watching like the Hunger Games when the body counts are like being shown in the sky of like all the people
Yeah.
who died that day. It's like shit. They just keep coming. They keep coming. It's like the COVID cases. It's like it's terrifying to see, even though it ends on a note that's kind of like optimistic. It's like, okay, the victims are getting their stories out, but at the same time, we're getting more and more and more victims
a
coming
great
forward,
point.
and that's sad. So I really like the ending though, because it is like a really interesting emotional catharsis for both the sadness of the cases, but the victory of this team doing their job and succeeding in that, which is a good bittersweet ending, really. And I like a bittersweet ending because it can be a career highlight, but also the worst time of someone else's life at the same time. And that's just the danger of being a journalist, is like you have to deal with the dichotomy of you could publish an award-winning article about someone whose life was ruined. And that's terrifying to think about,
I think thinking about like your points about like the potential emotional manipulation that may or may not be warranted, the idea of the juxtaposition of a church and a playground, or the kids on the scooters and this guy living in the house who's very blunt about his transgressions, and just thinking about that, and it's like, well, you understand why he did it that way, and it kind of makes you think like, this place, the church, that's supposed to be like very good for people to have a space to go, an outlet to, maybe try and connect with something higher, like a higher power, get fulfillment in different ways, and then end up being abused by that system is just such a, what do you call it? A perversion of what it's actually supposed to be, and it feels so wrong because of course it is so wrong. And it's almost like also just thinking about your point and just thinking about how maybe, because in the pursuit of doing a service, of showing the scope of this, maybe it's also kind of doing a disservice in the way that I feel like when you have things like the predator, like the sex offender, like watch list, or the sex offender like list, you have to sign up and like go tell people that you're a sex offender and stuff like that. There's positive to stuff like that, but there's also a negative, because I feel like a lot of the times it can end up being kind of like a fear mongering type of thing, where now you feel like you're like Marlin in Finding Nemo, and you can't let your kid go experience anything because there's predators everywhere, which might be true, but you just got to like use kind of like common sense, not saying that the victims in this movie like didn't, like, of course they trusted a system that they should have been able to trust, and then they were violated because of that. But I feel like maybe it does kind of a disservice too, in a way where it's like it makes the world seem like, because the world is a dark and dangerous place, but it doesn't have to be, and it's not that way all the time. And kids shouldn't have to live, and parents shouldn't have to live in fear of this thing also, and should be able to thrive and be happy despite people who want to not let you be happy and thrive and stuff like
Right.
that. So that's a really good discussion to have, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. So yeah, a lot of good discussion points I think this movie brings up. And we haven't really talked about like any of like the visual styles or the editing, but it is one of those movies that I feel like is just like kind of more about its script and its actors and its storytelling, but like it does a good job. I mean, we talked about like the dichotomy, the visual stuff of like the kids and the church, but like I think it's a very well presented movie. I think they use the space. Like I love the offices and how like they decorate those sets, and there's something about like a business space that's really fun to see them play with on film. I felt the same way about like Network, like these little office buildings, the apartment, same thing. So I think they do a good job with it, but it's not like anything mind blowing. And I think that's also why, like when you think about like Best Picture and you consider all the angles, it's like this is not going to blow you away in some respects, but will it blow you away more in other respects than other movies? Maybe.
Yeah.
So like maybe it is the most emotionally captivating for you. Maybe it is the best performance movie for you. Maybe it's the best directed movie for you. And that might be why the Academy agreed with it. Maybe it just ticked all the boxes, even though there are movies that I think are just a little bit more impressive, more memorable, maybe just more emotionally resonant with me specifically.
Were they doing ranked choice for Best Picture back then?
I believe it was a preferential ballot. I think so.
Okay.
I think so. But yeah, like I think the biggest shock was I think the Big Short winning I can bring it up again, but the Big Short winning the PGA kind of threw everyone for a loop and was like, oh shoot. And then because Critics' Choice had happened so early that Spotlight wasn't really on people's radars. If anything, the Revenant, people were like, well, if the Revenant doesn't win, maybe the Big Short's gonna win. So I think Spotlight was the third most likely that day. After the Revenant and the Big Short, which is kind of interesting. The fact that it not only upset the Revenant but also the Big Short, if we're looking at like odds. But Spotlight, nominated for 6 awards, wins 2, Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. That's the only ones it took. But it was nominated for Director, Tom McCarthy, Supporting Actor for Mark Ruffalo, and Supporting Actress for Rachel McAdams, and Film Editing. So that is the slate. Now we get to rank them. And the rankings for like 5 or more, anything more than 5 is always very difficult because like you have to juggle the middle of the list. I know my bottom like few, like my bottom 3. I know my top 2. It's like those middle 3 that I'm always toying around with. But actually, no, I think my top 3 were pretty set. My ranking was pretty set. It was only like 4 and 5 and maybe 6 I was kind of toying around with. There was a moment where 8 was a little higher, but I bumped it lower. But my ranking is what it was this morning. So the conversations didn't change anything. So that's good. So I'm staying true to myself. The conversation, though, from 2015, back then, my ranking would have been so different.
Oh, yeah.
Way different. Like, I'm telling you right now, my number 8 would have been in my top 3. My number 3 probably would have been in my bottom 2. So it's very interesting how time changes.
Yeah.
I can let you know afterwards what those were. But Chad, take it away. What's your number 8 here on this slate? Because I don't even know what your least liked is here. I think we each like all these films.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. So my number 8 doesn't mean that I don't like it. It just means you got to rank them somehow.
Yep.
And I did change one thing. I did swap 2 movies in this, but it wasn't.
Let us know after what that is.
It wasn't my 1 and 8. It was like my 4 and 5 I swapped.
Okay. Cool.
And I don't really feel that strongly about it. But my number 8 is The Martian.
Okay. And my number 8, same reason. I like it. It's just it hasn't. It's the one that fell the most for me, and that's The Revenant. Is going to be my number 8,
Okay.
which is crazy considering it was the favorite to win. But what is your number 7?
Bridge of Spies.
Okay, my number 7 is The Big Short, which is funny because it was the second most likely one to win that day. So maybe I'm just going opposite of what the Academy thought. What is your number 6?
I swapped my 6 and 7 too, actually.
Okay.
Because I had this at number 7, but now it's at number 6. Spotlight.
All right. My number 6 is Bridge of Spies. Sorry, Mr. Spielberg. I love you. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Brooklyn.
Okay. My number 5 is The Martian, which means we're getting into our top half of the list. Chad, what is your number 4?
Number 4 is The Revenant.
Okay. And my number 4 is where I put Spotlight. Chad, what is your number 3?
The Big Short.
All right, and my number 3 is Brooklyn. So we have the same top 2. So I think we're looking at a coin flip, perhaps. We'll find out in a sec. But yes, what is your number 2, Chad?
This is actually tough because I'm glad that we have the same top 2 movies. and I actually wouldn't be mad at either of them winning, to be honest. But I put at number 2, Room.
Yeah, and number 2 is for me Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay,
So yeah.
this is how I thought it was gonna go.
What's your number 1, Chad? What's your number 1?
Mad Max Fury Road.
And my number 1 is Room. That was my number 1 since 2015.
Nice.
When 2015 was happening, like Star Wars: The Force Awakens was my favorite movie of that year, just because I was like, Star Wars is back, it's my favorite. But with time, I'm like, no, Room is my favorite movie of that year. So it was always gonna be my number 1, unless like I watched it and was like, oh, this is not hold up. So I'm so glad it did. But Mad Max Fury Road is like an impeccable movie. Like those top 2 for me, above all the rest. Like Brooklyn is my number 3, but like Brooklyn is like a far number 3 to my number 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I do something here?
What?
I want to throw away the coin flip, and I just want to make Room the number 1.
I for the sake of the show, I feel like we got to flip the coin just to see, and then we could also
Sure, flip the coin, see what happens. But honestly,
I'm happy with either one.
Honestly, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm just like, just even like talking about Room, like I was getting so emotional just thinking about my son. I just feel like it makes sense. Like I would totally be so happy for Room to win it.
Well,
yeah, let's do the coin flip and see what happens.
Let's just see. Let's make Mad Max heads, Room tails. Okay.
Okay.
Siri, flip a coin.
No.
It's heads. So Siri's voting for Mad Max. But if you would like to forego the coin flip, we can forego it. I'll let you decide because I'm fine with either of these winning. Siri has said Mad Max. I have said Room. You have said Mad Max. But if you'd like to say Room, we can make it Room.
Let's make it Room.
Are you sure? Because it's gonna get the Pickle Award too. I want you to. Are you sure? I don't want you to look back and be like, how do we not give Mad Max Best Picture? Because
Fine. All right, let's do Mad Max Fury Road.
Well, I feel like if it's your number 1 and it's my number 2 and my number 1's your number 2, the coin flip is kind of what should speak. But if again, you would have to change your ranking for it to be Room. But I don't want to.
It's one of those things to where like it's so tough because Room, Mad Max Fury Road was always like the number 1, but Room is the one that like shot up the most. So that's why I'm like, it could be my number 1 now, but I don't know. It's tough. Fury Road is more rewatchable and still has all the style and substance, and then Room it's just a gut punch.
Yeah, and this is the closest thing to a tie we'll ever get. But I think just because also we just watched all these movies, I wonder if like months from now, if we were to go with Room, like I would always still put in my number 1, but maybe you'll be like, no, Mad Max is still my definitive number 1, like always, will forever. And it seems like it is. Like I if the coin flip had said tails, I would have gone with Room, but the coin flip did go head, so now I'm just like,
let's just stick with the coin flip. Rules are rule.
Just also so we can set the precedents for the future too.
Just know that like Room is it really grew on me. So
I'll tell you, we're about to award it some more, so don't worry.
Cool.
But we're gonna save Mad Max just because I also want to respect the coin flip because I do love both those movies, but I do also think most of the people watching will also be happy Mad Max won. But no, and hey, in the future we might do an episode where we just kind of go back through all like our tight races and maybe see like if we want to change anything just for personal sake. Maybe we could at least talk about Room again. But okay, let's get into our acting prizes. I'm up first for actor, which I'm very excited about because I am so excited to give yet another junior award to our Mr. Jacob Tremblay, who I think is hands down, not hands down just because I think there are some good performances, but hands down the most impressive performance for me because I'm like, you're not a seasoned Leonardo DiCaprio. Yes, you're doing a lot of amazing things, but these seasoned actors, I mean, this is not a seasoned actor. This is a kid who's kind of like right off the street, just like literally doing a performance that any kid would be jealous of giving. Like Henry Thomas is my favorite child performance in E.T. This is probably number 2. If not, maybe like Saoirse Ronan in Atonement. Like it's a really short list. Like I really don't think there's many child actors better than Jacob Tremblay in Room. And the only one I can think of right now is Henry Thomas in E.T. Maybe I'll think of more as my mind sits on it, but maybe you have other names. But this is for me one of the definitive child performances. I actually sometimes prefer his performance to Bree's only because I think he has some of the more interesting scenes because he has a lot of the catharsis and the actual like realization in the film. But it is such a two-hander. Like I think you can't have one without the other. So I'm hoping one of us gives the other to her as well. But for now, I'll say Jacob Tremblay as my best actor is my best actor.
I didn't know what I was going first for this time.
Oh,
so
yeah. I forgot to reach out and tell you. But yeah, I believe you went first last time for actor because of Gary Cooper. So
yeah. So I wrote down 2 for both. And Jacob Tremblay was definitely in there. If you would have went actress first, I probably actually would have went Jacob Tremblay just because I'm really emotional right now just thinking about it. But the other one that I wrote down is Leo DiCaprio. I do think they were correct there to go with that because even though like Mad Max Fury Road is amazing, I don't feel like I mean I guess I could have went Nicholas Hoult, but honestly I think Leonardo DiCaprio just kind of really went through the gamut in that and just really gave just a stellar performance in that movie. So.
Cool. Yeah. Love it. I think it's great. Not my favorite of his, but I feel like, have we already given it to Wolf of Wall Street? I always forget. Have we ever given one to Leo, or is this Leo's first? Let me look.
You probably did. I don't really love his performance in Wolf of Wall Street, so I didn't.
We have never given Leo an award. Which
yes,
we have. Yes, we have.
Okay.
What am I saying? I think Django, we gave it to him.
Yes,
you gave it to Leo for Django.
There you go.
So now Leo does join this coveted Hall of Fame, I believe now, because I don't think we gave it to him for Wolf of Wall Street. Nope, I gave it to Tom Hanks for Captain Phillips. You gave it to Joaquin Phoenix for Her. And we haven't covered Titanic yet, which I'm sure he'll get one for it as well. But so that is going to be our first Leo Hall of Famer right there. He's finally there. He got his picture this Oscar a while ago, but this is his first picture this Hall of Fame appearance. Congratulations. But Chad, who's going to be your best actress today?
Yeah, I'll do it. Brie Larson.
Cool.
I had 2. I hope the other one makes it, but I don't know who you're going to go with. But honestly, yeah, I think Brie Larson just blew me away the most in this slate. Just like Jacob Tremblay and just like the performances in this, like she has to like we were talking about like her character having to stay strong for her kid. Like she shows that, and then even when she is safe and back in her with her family and stuff, you can see that just like nothing's the same for her, and she just like is in this like this glaze of like or haze of like things might never be happy for her the same, and she gets really suicidal and stuff, even though she has like this beautiful little boy, like just she's been through so much that she can never escape this, and until things start to look up, it ends more on a happy note than like her actually committing suicide or something like that, which I'm glad didn't happen. Because I don't think I'd be able to forgive the movie if that happened.
Yeah.
But her showing that this is like a lifelong thing that was done to her that she's never really gonna be able to get over completely. But to see her like go from like such a dark place to like more of like in upward trajectory, I think is just I can totally see why she won this award.
Yeah. For me, it's Brie. I'm glad you picked her because if you hadn't, I would have easily taken her. She's incredible. Like I did say, I sometimes prefer Jacob's scenes, but really, like it is a duo performance, the 2 of them. You can't have one without the other. And honestly, the fact that they didn't even nominate Jacob, I think it's just because of his age. But it's a shame they couldn't both win or couldn't both at least be there together nominated. But I'm so glad she won. Like I think it's such a cool win. I like how this year they were kind of like Leo's getting the career Oscar, so we can have fun with the other ones. Like I would have loved Sylvester Stallone, but like Mark Rylance, his first nomination, he wins. Brie Larson, her first nomination, she wins. Oh gosh, who won supporting that year? I literally had it and it just went out of my. Oh, Alicia Vikander, duh. My favorite actress of all time. She won after a year of like 5 or 6 great performances. She was in, Son of a Gun, Ex Machina, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. She's in The Danish Girl, which she wins for. I feel like there's another 1 or 2 there that she was in, but like again, she's having a stellar year, so she wins. I like how they were able to like award people who weren't these big names yet. I think it shows that they're all about integrity and performance, not always about legacy, even though you also give it to Leo at the same time. So I like how we have that dichotomy, Brie and Jacob and Leo. But for my best actress, I'm happy I get to pick her because she was definitely my runner up here. And it's very interesting for two reasons. One, because now she joins the Hall of Fame, which is cool because we get awarded her once. Two, because I picked a child actor, Jacob Tremblay. And I also picked this actress when she was a child in Atonement, but I'm picking Saoirse Ronan in Brooklyn, which is really cool because now I'm going to go full circle and pick her for a role where she's now a woman, an older grown woman. And she joins the Hall of Fame now because of Atonement and Brooklyn. Now she's also in the Hall of Fame too. So Saoirse Ronan will join Leo DiCaprio, and I'm sure she'll get another one too because I know what's coming in 2017. So and 2019. Honestly, Saoirse might have 5 of these by the end of our run, maybe 6 to 7. She just needs a real Oscar now. That's the real key there. But Chad, any thoughts on Brooklyn on Saoirse Ronan? I've already talked about how much I love her in that movie. I just think she has such a great like composure, independence, but also just such a grace and beauty, and I just love her voice. I love the way she speaks, the way she talks, the way she interacts with people. I love her. She's great.
Yeah, so good. I was hoping maybe like Charlize could get in there, but I mean, we already gave Mad Max picture, and it's hard to deny Saoirse's performance in here as well because she carries that movie and has that not moral dilemma, but that life dilemma that she has to do, and I just she nails it. So this is such a great pick. I agree.
I love it. Yeah, what's interesting too is like if we hadn't picked Mad Max for the coin flip, then Mad Max wouldn't have gotten anything. So I feel like we did a good job because we got 2 awards for Room and then 1 for Mad Max. I think it's a good balance because it would have been bad if Mad Max Fury Road didn't have any representation on our list at all. So the fact that it's represented there by picture. But we have quite a slate here. Just to recap, my best actor Jacob Tremblay for Room, Chad's best actor Leonardo DiCaprio for The Revenant, my best actress Saoirse Ronan for Brooklyn, your best actress Brie Larson for Room, and our best picture decided by the coin flip because it was impossible to decide. Because I felt bad leaving this movie off, you felt bad leaving Room off, so we just let the coin decide. Mad Max Fury Road is going to be the best picture for now. We could always change it. It's our show. It's our rules. We can do whatever we want. But I mean, it just shows how really those 2 films were, in my opinion, far above the rest. Like really looking at my ranking, Brooklyn is the one that jumped. Brooklyn jumped a lot. Bridge of Spies also jumped a lot. I probably would have put Bridge of Spies at 8 going into this ranking. And then Revenant fell the most. Revenant, I was shocked. It would have been my number 3. It became my number 8. Brooklyn probably would have been my number 7 going into this. It became my number 3. So I'm happy to see Brooklyn rise. Sad to see Revenant fall. But everything else is pretty much as is. Like Martian and Spotlight holding down the middle for me. But what were any big changes from 2015 for you, Chad? Were there any movies that grew more or less?
Room jumped up quite a bit. I think The Revenant got better for me the second time. I think The Martian was kind of still the same. The Brooklyn was kind of the same. I liked them a lot. I'm trying to think of other ones that jumped up. Spotlight was still the same.
So it seems like the big one was The Revenant. Yeah, and The Room. Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Nice. So nothing really fell that much for you, which is good.
No.
Perfect. Well, that is 2015. Our retrospective is just beginning because I still have a lot of videos to release for the retrospective. But you can check out my Pickle Awards, where I will be awarding all of my Best Picture nominees and winner, which will probably be Room. Let's be honest. But I'll be doing an awards. Just a brief recap of what I would have awarded. It's not going to be a full award show. There's not going to be performances or in memoriams or anything. It's just going to be me announcing who my nominees and winners would have been. But as a special treat, I have all 4 of the hosts also giving their Best Picture slates as to what they would have nominated. And as we heard from Chad, he had a lot of Best Picture worthy films. So he has to confine it to 10, which is very tough. But Chad's going to give me his 10 and then his ultimate winner, which I assume I will be Mad Max. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else. But you can stay tuned for that. You'll also hear from Matt, Chad, Zach, and Kelsey for that. Stay tuned. We've been doing retrospective commentaries on Marvelous Movie Mondays, where Kelsey has been having some guests on to talk about Marvel movies from 10 years ago. We also have a retrospective Survivor Small Bites episode coming out for Survivor Cambodia. I'm also going to be doing an A24 retrospective on year 3 of A24, which stacked year. You have Room, Ex Machina, The End of the Tour, Amy, So many great movies that year for A24. And that should be it, unless you guys have any inkling or itching for anything else. I know Matt wants to maybe do a 50 Shades of Grey TikTok. So we will see what else comes about. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. Chad, we have to tease the next month. We are going to be going back to upsets. We are still in upsets. And I figured, you know what? I've been going around the world. How fun would it be to talk about a movie that won Best Picture, that was an upset, and quite literally is talking about going around the world? I've been on the sea for more than 80 days. I've been on the sea for about 90 something days, so we're a little off, but we are talking about 1956 because that is the year that Around the World in 80 Days won Best Picture. I thought it was a perfect time considering we just hit my 80-day mark this month. So we'll be talking about that in September. It was supposed to be August, but we kind of pushed everything a month just because we had that 1 month off to kind of recuperate. But the other films in that slate, we have Around the World in 80 Days, Friendly Persuasion, Giant, The King and I, and The 10 Commandments. So some big movies.
Yeah.
10 Commandments, a huge one, Cecil B. DeMille. Giant, obviously part of that trio. We already talked about A Place in the Sun. It's part of that trilogy, that spiritual trilogy. King and I, a musical. Friendly Persuasion, your guy Gary Cooper's back. So a lot of great movies to talk about. Maybe some great. I haven't seen any of these, actually. Chad, have you seen any of these?
No.
Ooh, very exciting. So we're going to both kind of be going in blind. It's a very long slate. All these movies are like pushing 3 hours. So that's why we're going to give it a lot of time. Do it in September because we don't want to mess with our spooky season. But then we will also be doing some more fun upsets as the year kind of wraps up. Ending, of course, with Citizen Kane in December. I don't know if we've announced that or not, but we're going to be doing Citizen Kane in December, finally, which is huge for the channel because that's a big movie. But Chad, anything else on your end? Where can they find you? What else is new? Anything on Letterboxd to tease or your YouTube? What have you been up to?
Yeah, you can check out my channel Cinema Chad, where we do a lot of ranking stuff over there. You Ranking with Me is the show that we do where we rank movies and franchises and all that stuff. So check out all those. We're working on making some more. But I'm trying to do more content that comes out more frequently. So Carrie and I, my wife Carrie and I, have been working on a series of going through our physical media collection. So we're trying to do that. And then also, you notice the poster in the back, we're working on a Buffy review series.
Yes.
We're also doing that. So and we've been having a lot of fun. I just need to start editing. But check out that. Check out Welcome to Primetime, which is our horror channel that we run with our friend Hunter. And we have a lot of fun talking about horror stuff. And also we did a whole Buffy series there as well. So check that stuff out. And that's about it for me.
Perfect. Always a pleasure talking to you, Chad. I mean, I know it's been a while for us. They saw us recently, but it's great to be back in the swing of things. And as I told Kelsey, the same thing. We're now in the swing of things. We're back and better than ever. TikTok is going to really blow up in September. We're really going to be putting a lot of good stuff out there. Chad has a series coming soon there. We're going to have some stuff from Matt and Kelsey and Zach as well. So stay tuned. It's going to be really fun. Otherwise, thank you so much. You can find me here at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. Find me at Dylan Randazzo at Letterboxd if you want to see all the retrospective reviews. I'm slowly publishing them all. I have them all written out on my notes app. I like to write them on my notes app and then edit them and publish them. And it takes me a little longer than I would like to, but they're coming out. And then, of course, all these videos that you can stay tuned for on the channel are coming as well. But otherwise, thank you so much. We'll see you next month with 1956. And stay cool. Thanks.
And the Oscar goes to Spotlight.